of students. As stated by my previous colleague, there is a few experiences that we've heard and seen. I would share one today, but simply I don't have the time for that. But I do encourage that you look at the SSCCC's videos on webinars where students have openly shared these experiences with them. So with that being said, members of the board, we do hope that you, and I urge that you vote in favor of item 4.8. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next, we have Joan Waddell. You have control of your mic and can address the board.
Thank you, Chancellor Oakley, Board President Haynes, Vice President Costa, Board of Governors. I'm Joanne Waddell, President of the Los Angeles College Faculty Guild, AFT Local 1521. Today also speaking as a Vice President of CFT. I rise in support of the CFT Community College's response to the proposed modifications to evaluation and tenure review regulatory action. As I have worked with several of the governors over the years, I've always known the governors to be mindful and thoughtful of stakeholders' regulatory and statutory rights. Today, I urge the Board of Governors to take action in alignment with, not in violation of, those stakeholder regulatory and statutory rights within the scope of negotiations for evaluation and tenure review. Thank you for your time and your attention to this very important matter.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Jim Mailer. You have control of your mic and can address the board.
Good afternoon, Jim Mailer, speaking on behalf of the Community College Council of the CFT. I addressed the board at your last meeting, along with submitting 2 letters regarding public comments, one with my colleagues at the last meeting and one individually for this meeting, along with a letter that I submitted this time, which gave detailed reasons as to why we believe these regulations are violating current statute and current regulations. We also submitted our suggestions as to how you could modify these proposed regulations to make sure that everyone is in compliance. I wanted to point out again that I find it very ironic that despite the fact that we're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, the labor groups were steadfastly and purposefully excluded from this entire process, allowing us the only chance to weigh in via these public comment periods. So my colleague from CCA, CTA, who spoke earlier, Eric Kalyamagi, presented our points in great detail. We agree with everything Eric just presented to you all. I would like to propose that you consider tabling a vote from today until the attorneys from CFT, the attorneys from CTA, and the attorneys from the Chancellor's office can sit down and have a meaningful dialogue about how these regulations can be modified to ensure compliance so that we don't have to go the litigation route, because that will be unfortunate. It'll be an unfortunate waste of resources.
30 seconds remaining.
And then we will end up with simply having the attorneys all meet again in the future to discuss how to settle this and make sure that we're not violating any current statute. So I strongly urge the board to consider tabling this today until we can have a follow-up meeting with all attorneys to work this out. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, the username is RAD Region 7. You have control of your mic and can address the board.
Thank you. Good afternoon, President Haynes, Vice President Costa, and members of the board. My name is Paul Medina, and I serve as a Regional Affairs Director with the Student Center for California Community Colleges. I urge the board to vote in favor of agenda item 4.8. This item addresses the student anti-racism plan in which the SSCCC covers on-campus climate on racial equity, anti-discrimination, and diversity, equity, and inclusion. In attending a multicultural campus district in the Los Angeles area, one would think that faculty and staff will be truly tolerable of all students, customs, and norms. I've unfortunately seen and heard of issues in which people in positions of instruction, trust, and leadership lack culture of competency, training, and common etiquette. I've seen on occasion staff and even faculty direct at students for microaggressions, both subtle and direct, on areas with students differing with different sounding names, accents, and customs. I've called out these individuals acting in this behavior. It is wrong and unacceptable. Unfortunately, I can't be everywhere and every time this takes place. That is why I urge this board to vote in favor of agenda item 4.8, as countless students supported throughout the 73 districts and 116 colleges in the California Community College system. Thank you, and you all have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Are there any other public comments?
Yes, we have one more hand raised. Aaron Lacourte, you have control of the mic and can address the board.
Hi, sorry. Thank you for your time. I'm gonna cut it really short. Yeah, I hope the board votes on this because this is very important. I can tell you just as a student trustee at my school, 2 words, Orange County, and that should say enough about how, how the board really needs to vote on this. I could only give you one example as to how important the student voice is. And when I try, as for me trying to create student engagement and empowering symposium for my school, my voice was almost shut down. I hit a lot of the boxes in terms of my intersectionality. And let me tell you how difficult it's been to navigate all of them in one term and being able to serve the students. And I think it's really important considering that even the faculty senate of my school decided to vote on, again, it's on the person who does not push for anything DEIA. And I think it's, the student leaders who do speak up, they're silenced and they're not listened to and they're not heard, and that they will do anything to silence anybody who goes against that grain. And I think it's really important that that this really needs to be addressed, especially when, like I said, in the creation of this symposium, I had a broad range of students who wanted to give their testimony as to how things have affected them. And had it not been for my chancellor backing me on this,
remaining.
I don't think I would have had a chance to have those students' voices be heard. And that's how important it is to let you know how systemic this issue is and how deeply rooted this whole thing is in white supremacy. And the only place where students can feel seen and heard is in their ethnic studies courses. And I think that needs to be truly supported throughout the state and not just on the local level. So please vote yes on this.
Thank you. With that, closing public comment and Vice President Costa, I think you have a question.
I have a question for the president. Thank you. So I know that this is a work in progress. And my question of the staff is because the Ed Code actually vests the authority of minimum qualifications in the Board of Governors. Are you going to come back to us with an update on, local district compliance as well as this issue of measurement? Because I do look at the competencies that the task force has come up with, and I'm still scratching my head about that piece of it. And so I'm hoping that you will come back to us on this because it is an issue that is important. It's complex, but I think we need to keep having this conversation.
Short answer is yes. We will come back with an update. And along with our partners in the State Academic Senate, we'll continue to update the board.
Thank you. So can I get a motion? Yes.
I would like to move. We heard loud and clear from the students, so I would like to move this item for their approval.
So we have a motion from Board Member Terra-Silva. Can I get a second?
Second by Elizondo.
Perfect. We have a second by Elizondo. Would you please call the roll?
Amy Costa.
Aye.
Joshua Elizondo.
Aye.
Tom Epstein.
Aye.
Felicia Escobar Carrillo.
Aye.
Jolina Grande.
Aye.
Pamela Haynes.
Aye.
Jennifer Perry.
Aye.
Bill Rawlings.
Aye.
Roy Shabazian.
Yes.
Valerie Shaw.
Yes.
Yulia Tarasova.
Aye.
Blas Villalobos.
Aye.
President Haynes, the motion carries.
Thank you. We want to note the time of 2:32. We are still in our action items, so hopefully we can move through them. We have still have some other items to get through. So 4.9 is the discipline list update, and we have Vice Chancellor Lowe presenting on this one.
Thank you very much, Board President Haynes. Good afternoon, everyone. Aisha Lowe, Vice Chancellor of Educational Services and Support. We'll quickly get through this item 4.9 and update to the disciplines list. So this is one you have seen before, Board of Governors periodically. The Board of Governors updates the minimum qualifications for faculty in various disciplines.
This particular item before you proposes adding Asian American Studies, Native American, American Indian Studies, and nanotechnology to the disciplines list. As a quick reminder, each year, the statewide academic senate facilitates hearings and voting on changes to the disciplines list that are brought by recommendations from discipline faculty. Those recommendations then come to the chancellor's office and then before you, the Board of Governors for approval. This is an annual process that began in 1989, and you can see in your digest some of the more recent changes. In particular for this item, the addition of Asian American Studies and Native American, American Indian Studies supports the system's work to implement ethnic studies programs and courses across the state. Those additions, along with the addition of nanotechnology, is also in keeping with the general goal of evolving curriculum as industry evolves. So for the sake of time, if you do not mind, Academic Senate President Dolores Davison, I think I covered it all. For the sake of time, jump in if you think there's anything urgent to cover. Otherwise, we will move to any questions or comments.
So thank you. Are there any board questions or comments on this item? I don't see any. Speak up, ever hold your peace.
I don't see any in LA.
All right, thank you. Do we have any public comment on this item?
The public comment period for item 4.9 is now open. We will begin with Sacramento, then Los Angeles, and conclude with virtual comments. For virtual attendees, please use the raise hand feature. If calling in, hit *9. In the interest of time, you'll have a maximum of 2 minutes. Vice President Costa, do we have any comments in Sacramento?
We do not.
Thank you. There are no comments in Los Angeles, and we do not have any hands raised at this time.
Thank you. Then can I?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion.
I heard a second from Shabazian.
Hey.
Shabazian seconds. So can we get a roll call vote?
Amy Costa.
Aye.
Joshua Elizondo.
Aye.
Tom Epstein.
Aye.
Felicia Escobar Carrillo.
Aye.
Jolena Grande.
Aye.
Pamela Haynes.
Aye.
Jennifer Perry.
Aye.
Bill Rawlings.
Aye.
Roy Shabazian.
Yes.
Valerie Shaw.
Yes.
Yulia Tarasova.
Aye.
Blas Villalobos.
Aye.
President Haynes, the motion carries.
Thank you. Moving to item 4.10. Equitable transfer, board procedures and standing order amendments. We have Executive Vice Chancellor Alvarado and General Counsel LaForestier, and as well as Vice Chancellor Lowe to present. Who wants to start?
I'm sorry, apologies. Still a little stunned from the last one. Executive Vice Chancellor Alvarado, Maria Alvarado, presenting on, I'll kick us off on the standing order items. So we brought this to you all in January. These are updates to the standing orders to make explicit the process for approving state level transfer agreements. In particular, there were concerns around how our office identifies which institutions to engage in partnership, what data metrics we would be looking at, and what requirements we would need to follow and bring to the board, and what is the board's role in that process. The updated standing orders include updates that we received late in advance of this meeting, and we have incorporated updates over the weekend, and you should have a revised version in front of you. I'm happy to walk through those edits, but in the interest of time, we'll defer to you all if you have any questions, and I'm happy to answer any of those going forward. What I will say is that our orientation and focus on this has maintained that we are focused on equitable transfer outcomes, improving equitable transfer outcomes, and ensuring that we have clarity on the types of evidence-based or data-informed decisions as we go forward. We also want to make sure that we are bringing information to this board to make sure that you have the ability to vote on any agreements with specifically for-profit institutions. So with that, I will pass it back to you, Board President Haynes.
Are there any board comments or questions? Board Member Epstein. Did I interrupt something from Los Angeles?
No, I was just commenting. There's no comments in LA.
right, thank you. Then Board Member Epstein, you have a question or comment?
Yeah, I want to thank the Chancellor's Office staff for making some changes that in alignment with what I was suggesting. The version that's been handed out is different than the one that was in the original board packet. So the board should take a look at that. In particular, I wanted to point out at the end of section A, that the Chancellor's Office shall prioritize nonprofit transfer institutions whose missions are aligned with California community colleges and support progress toward the vision for success. That was actually Vice President Costa's, I think, original suggestion last time. I also want to thank that in subsection 3, that the limitation on for-profit colleges using marketing and branding from the CCCs without our explicit consent is now required. I had made another suggestion that was not incorporated, and in part because and I understand because it's a very difficult one to execute, is that a lot of well, I shouldn't say a lot, but a handful of for-profit colleges have either converted to nonprofits, or nonprofits have basically hired a for-profit subcontractor to do most of the work. And I don't know if there's any way of stating that we could work into these regulations, but it would be worth. Those kind of institutions should also deserve the same scrutiny, the extra scrutiny that the for-profits are being given here in this order. And I'm certainly open to suggestions of how to word that. I made a suggestion that was not included in the proposal here today, but I can understand why it wasn't, because I kind of made it up, and it didn't really have any data behind it. But I don't know. I'd like to ask the staff if they understand the issue, and I'd like to know what, if anything, we could do to kind of unmask colleges that are largely for-profit but operating under kind of.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Marty.
Sorry, Chancellor. I was just going to say, Member Epstein appreciated the comments that you provided and the engagement in these particular updates to the standing orders. We did wrestle with that, with the request that you had included in your proposed edits. I think at this time it goes beyond the scope of our evaluation and the role we have relative to these state transfer agreements. I think what we are also looking at, though, is as we pull together the data around each institution that we will be bringing back to this board on a more regular basis for both for-profit and nonprofit institutions or any state transfer agreements. We hope to have an opportunity to continue this conversation and look at the outcomes for our students, and including things related to debt and other key metrics. So I anticipate more to come on this as we continue to unpack and uncover what the data is saying about what happens to our students as they transition to these institutions.
I appreciate that, and I would hope that you would, when you see institutions like that you do give it a kind of a more serious look than you would a more established nonprofit, pure nonprofit organization.
Absolutely.
I call you a chancellor now.
No, they don't want, I don't have the education for that. I'm gonna look at our chancellor though, and I think to Tom's point, you have authority for issues as you deem appropriate. And I think that what Tom has just outlined is one that we would deem as one of those appropriate things for you to look at.
So before you answer, I just want to add part of, I get a feel, butterflies in my stomach, only because there are times when there are unintended consequences. Our associate degree for transfer, in terms of its attainment, is outpacing the ability of our public institutions and even some of our private institutions here in California to really accept those students. Many of those students are students of color. And for many of the institutions of which you may be referring to, while I appreciate the oversight, and this is not about not having oversight, it's the kind of oversight one wants to have, especially given that many of our students of color are going to those students. Having an oversight, having some measurement is important. But if our institutions here in California are not accepting them, we need to make certain that those institutions are doing right by them. So I get that piece, but I don't want to close the door. And part of that is because for many of our minoritized students, time is a killer. It is a killer of dreams. And as a result of that, they have to make decisions, and they should have the right and the ability to transfer to get that 4-year degree in a way that benefits them and their families. And so I know that's not the intention of any kind of oversight, but I want to lift that up because a lot of things can get caught in that fishnet relative to that.
So my answer would be, we hear what you're saying. These are, as Marty mentioned, these are concerns of ours. We are working with and waiting to hear from the Department of Education any other changes that they plan to make on both institutions that are converting from for-profit to nonprofit, as well as institutions that hire for-profits on a revenue share agreements. Those two issues are being looked at as we speak. So we want to wait and see what they come up with. But part of the challenge is what information would be available to us. In many cases, that information is not publicly available, so it would be hard for us to dig it out. And the last thing I'd say is, with the continued evolution of how the environment is shaking out, many publics and several HBCUs do use for-profit contractors to help with recruitment and others. So again, before we navigate these waters, we just want to be sure we're focusing on the right information, and that begins and ends with our student outcomes. But we're cognizant of this issue, and we're trying to find ways to get at it.
Are there other board member comments, questions, or concerns? Don't see any. Is there any public comment on this item?
The public comment period for item 410 is now open. We will begin with Sacramento, then Los Angeles, and conclude with virtual comments. In the interest of time, you'll have a maximum of 2 minutes. Vice President Costa, are there any comments in Sacramento?
There are no comments in Sacramento.
Thank you. We do not have any comments in LA, and I will hand it over to Gary for the one hand raise.
We do have one hand raised. Angela Perry, you have control of your mic and can address the board.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon. My name is Angela Perry, Director of Policy and Advocacy at the Institute for College Access and Success. Thank you, Chancellor Oakley, President Hayes, and members of the board for the opportunity to offer comments on item 410. TICAS shares President Hayes' concerns regarding the reality that California community college students face barriers in transferring to other public colleges within California. Because the most popular majors at our public universities are often impacted, place-bound students in many parts of the state have limited public options when transferring. As a result, we are very appreciative of the updates that were shared today by the Chancellor's Office staff and sincerely appreciate that the Chancellor's Office dissolved the MOU with APUS in January. We also appreciate the efforts that the Chancellor's Office has put into updating the procedures for signing MOUs going forward. However, we believe that the standing order should be amended to include clear minimum standards for each of the data elements identified in the proposed language. We further recommend that the Chancellor's Office explore the possibility of data sharing agreements rather than MOUs, where additional data on student outcomes is desired, and potentially as a first step in the process of designing transfer pathways with other institutions. We also appreciated Vice President Costa's comments at the January board meeting regarding the need to proactively identify high-quality transfer options for community college students, and echo member Epstein's recommendation that language
30 seconds remaining.
regarding covert for-profit institutions. We are very pleased to see the limitations placed on the use of community college logos in advertising without board approval, as well as the requirement for board approval of an MOU with for-profit colleges, but would recommend that the language should be further clarified to require a board vote in a publicly noticed open session. We look forward to continued collaboration with the Chancellor's Office and board on these issues. And thank you again for your time and attention and for the thoughtful discussion on this topic today.
Thank you. If there's no other public comments,
President Haynes, there are no other hands raised.
thank you. Then I would ask for a motion and a second to approve.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion by Epstein and a second by his co-pilot. Member Terasova, would you please call the roll?
Amy Costa. Aye. Joshua Elizondo.
Aye.
Tom Epstein.
Aye.
Felicia Escobar Carrillo.
Aye.
Jolina Grande.
Aye.
Pamela Haynes.
Aye.
Jennifer Perry.
Aye.
Bill Rawlings.
Aye.
Roy Shabazian.
Yes.
Valerie Shaw.
Yes.
Yulia Tarasova. Aye. Blas Villalobos.
Aye.
President Haynes, the motion carries.
Thank you. I should note that we're on our last action item, 4.11, proposed revisions to the Board of Governors procedures, delegation of baccalaureate degree program approval, and we have Vice Chancellor Lowe presenting.
Thank you very much, President Haynes. Afternoon again, Board of Governors, Aisha Lowe, Vice Chancellor of Educational Services and Support. This item is a second reading of a proposal to add to the procedures and standing orders for the Board of Governors a section that would delegate to the board president authority to approve baccalaureate degree programs. I have a very quick slide deck, if we could pull that up, just a few slides to remind us of what this topic is and why we are making this revision. Next slide, please. So as a reminder, Assembly Bill 927 is really the core topic here. This is a bill geared toward increasing the number of baccalaureate degrees that community colleges can offer. It made permanent our 15 pilot sites from previous years and allowed community colleges to expand up to 30 additional baccalaureate degree programs per year and required two very specific application cycles with very specific timelines. Next slide. You will see in this next slide a graphical representation of what we are trying to squeeze into 6 months. I will not go over it step by step for the sake of time, but because this law was very prescriptive, we have a number of things that must be accomplished within 6 months, when in fact, we need more like 9 to 12 months to get them done. Processes that have to take place to actually review the applications that our colleges submit, which will be a holistic and comprehensive review process in coordination with our baccalaureate degree program work group. We then have an intersegmental consultation process that we have to lead and to navigate, where our colleagues from CSU, UC, and AICCU get to review those programs and get to submit objections of duplication that we then have to negotiate with our four-year partners and bring together the necessary campuses if there are disagreements about duplication. There is also then an appeal process that we have to navigate for our colleges. If we make a decision around provisional approval that colleges want to appeal, and all of that needing to happen before bringing these to the Board of Governors. So what you see represented in the standing orders, again, second read being brought before you again, is the delegation of that approval to the Board of Governors president so that we can do our best to stay within the very tight timelines that have been set within this legislation. Next and last slide. With that said, however, we do want to assure the Board of Governors, next slide, please. With that said, we do want to assure the Board of Governors that even with that delegation of authority to the board president, that all newly approved baccalaureate degree programs will be presented to the full board as an informational item at that next available Board of Governors meeting. With that, I will open it up for any questions or comments.
Do we have board member questions?
We see
have
Member
one.
Grande in LA.
Okay, so let's go with board member Grande and then Vice President Costa.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Vice Chancellor Lowe. I am thrilled that Dr. Brooks was able to convene a group of interested stakeholders last week, including representatives from the Baccalaureate Degree Pilot Program Steering Committee, which consisted of the inaugural 15 pilot colleges, and had a discussion about evaluating the Cycle 1 January 2022 proposals that would expand our community college baccalaureate offerings in our colleges and districts. I am looking forward to the Board of Governors and to you, President Haynes, in particular, for approving the first collection of applications that will expand beyond the 15 pilot, now permanent bachelor degree programs.
Thank you for those comments and confidence in me. Vice President?
Yeah, just really briefly and kind of tethering back to the previous item, my hope, Dr. Lowe and Chancellor, is that instead of also just taking what the colleges want to offer in BA, we're being strategic about where these bottlenecks are. Because I believe that we can offer these BAs. The program has been wildly successful. And I think we have an opportunity to help our students that are place bound that don't have places to go.
We agree.
Is there public comment?
The public comment period for item 4.11 is now open. We will begin with Sacramento, then Los Angeles, and conclude with virtual comments. In the interest of time, you'll have a maximum of 2 minutes. Vice President Costa, are there any comments in Sacramento?
We do, Eric.
Eric K.
We're on a first name basis now, Eric.
Okay. Hello again, members of the board. I'm still Eric Galliumaggi, and I'm still the president of CCA. I have no position on bachelor's degrees. That's an academic senate matter. But I do have a position on process. I recognize that you have tight timelines. But when you go ahead and hand over your authority to a single person, you eliminate the ability for it to go for public readings or public comment. There doesn't seem to be in the procedure that you have at hand any form of an appeal or an override. One of the reasons why I come up to these meetings every 2 months is to have the ability to address you. I do not always get my way, I've noticed, but I have the ability to speak with you, to go ahead and get across the positions and if possible to influence. I strongly encourage the Board of Trustees to consider this a temporary matter. You went ahead and approved 10 grants earlier in this meeting in 15 minutes. And then just a little while ago, you approved 3 changes to the discipline list in 2 minutes. It should be possible to publicly notice degrees, to listen to public comments, 3 minutes, and to be able to act efficiently. The idea of democracy, the ability to address our leaders is important. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment?
There are no public comments in LA, and we do not have any hands raised.
All right, thank you. Then can I get a motion to approve?
I would like to make the motion.
We have a motion. Can we get a second?
I'll second.
We had Grande and Perry.
Thank you. Thank you. So can we call the roll?
Amy Costa.
Aye.
Joshua Elizondo.
Aye.
Tom Epstein.
Aye.
Felicia Escobar Carrillo.
Aye.
Delina Grande.
Aye.
Pamela Haynes.
Aye.
Jennifer Perry.
Aye.
Bill Rawlings.
Aye.
Roy Shabazian.
Yes.
Valerie Shaw.
Yes.
Yulia Terrasilva.
Aye.
Blas Villalobos.
Aye.
President Haynes, the motion carries.
Thank you. We have completed our action agenda and we're now moving on to first reading. Item 5.1 is a first reading and public hearing for proposed amendments to Title V of the California Code of Regulations, amending, repealing, and adding multiple sections related to the work experience education. This item will be presented by Vice Chancellor Lowe.
Thank you very much, President Haynes. Good afternoon, everyone. I am still Aisha Lowe, Vice Chancellor of Educational Services and Support. Happy to bring you this item, my last item for today, with proposed changes to our Title V regulations for work experience education. We do have a slide deck, so I'll wait for that to come onto the screen. Thank you very much, Gary. So the Chancellor's Office is very pleased to bring this item before you in partnership with the California Community Colleges Curriculum Committee, or 5C. We are recommending these revisions to Title V regulations for work experience education. I want to give a special thank you to the members of 5C, and in particular, Jan Young and Eric Scheer, who helped to lead this work, as well as Academic Senate leadership. The current regulations for cooperative work experience, as it is currently titled, were enacted 50 years ago, back in 1971, before economic and workforce development was even adopted as the third primary mission of the community colleges. So needless to say, these regulations are out of date, they're antiquated, and very much in need of these revisions. And in particular, as our state's economy continues to evolve, work experience and education must also evolve so that we can ensure that students have access to experiential learning and are prepared for the future of work. Next slide, please. Just a little bit of background in case any of us are not familiar with what this is on our campuses, but the purpose of cooperative work experience within our colleges is really to facilitate work-based learning opportunities. Locally, this is a partnership between the college or district with an employer and with students to help students to achieve work-based learning outcomes. So think of it as that hands-on work-related learning that students engage in. Next slide, please. A little bit about the purpose and goals of why we are bringing forward these revisions. As I talked about, one, the current regulations are very antiquated, outdated. We wanted to bring them into our current understanding of work and work preparation. But we also wanted to revise these regulations to better align them with the goals of the Vision for Success, as well as our work around diversity, equity, and inclusion by integrating high quality work experience opportunities as part of the learning process for an expanded range of instructional programs. In addition, you will also see the updated regulations promote student educational and occupational goals, things like career awareness, learning industry culture, and developing professional networks, in a student's career field. You'll also see that these revisions and reorganizations are really focused on streamlining the sections of regulation and providing what we're calling a first round of technical cleanup. There is an additional round of updates that the Board of Governors can anticipate in the future, where we will work with the field and the necessary experts from the field to go a bit further and reimagine work experience education and lean further into infusing experiential learning to become a norm across all of our academic programs. Today, the current work experience regulations really does, in practice at least, primarily focus on CTE fields. However, we know there are other forms of work experience that already take place on our colleges, things like the practicums that future teachers engage in, or clinicals for nurses in training, as well as service learning. So the board can anticipate future revisions that will really seek to bring all of the various forms of work experience together under a more broad conceptualization of experiential learning, which will also better detail what it means to incorporate work-based learning throughout the disciplines. So more to come on that. Next slide. I'm going to gloss over these next slides. What you will see in these next slides is just an overview of the current Title V regulations, how they are organized, and what content is in the current regulations. So we'll just gloss over these and I'll really highlight what the changes are. So if we can go ahead and move forward to slide 9, please. There we go. So highlighting really what the key changes are here. You'll see here again, just clean up, collapsing what were 14 somewhat disjointed sections into intentionally organized and better sequenced 5 sections. You'll see a change in name from cooperative work experience to work experience education. That's actually going back to one of the original namings of this regulations, is more in keeping with the language for work-based learning across the field. Of course, along with that cleanup, a new numbering system, and really this overarching focus on simplifying the regulations to make it easier and less cumbersome for local districts to further proliferate experiential learning across the disciplines. Next slide, please. Highlighting then a couple of things. Next slide, please. Oh, there we go. Highlighting then a couple of things specific to that alignment to the vision for success as well as equity goals. You'll see this expansion of work experience opportunities for a greater number of students as well as a greater number of programs. Again, with this goal of really integrating this across a number of instructional programs. And then also alignments with some of our equity imperatives, prioritizing high need students within the regulations, allowing for students who already are currently working to still engage with work experience, really focusing on building student social capital, as well as making sure that these regulations align with our work around credit for prior learning. Next slide. Additionally, you will see a very important change that has been in the making for some time, which is specifically permitting non-credit work experience. Current regulations do not prohibit non-credit, but given the omission of non-credit in regulations historically in the field, there's been an interpretation that non-credit could not be included here. So we worked very much with 5C, Jan Young, ACE, and other organizations to ensure that non-credit was specifically noted in the regulations. You'll see the removal of a local plan replaced with the requirement for local board policy and procedure. Again, a strong focus here on dismantling unnecessary administrative burdens for colleges. You will see a removal of the distinction between occupational and general work experience, really towards this goal of ensuring that work experience is a unified experience focused on a student's future occupation and them gaining experience within that occupation. You'll see a revision and simplification of the credit hour calculation, which previously had 2 different calculations that we heard from colleges was sometimes confusing. So we've unified and simplified that. You'll see this allowance for work experience education to be integrated as a component within a lecture, a lab, or an activity. So again, expanding the ways in which work experience could be used, allowing for part-time jobs, accommodating economically disadvantaged students, and clarifying what is needed around record keeping. So last slide, and then we can get into questions or comments. We have been taking this set of regulations on what we like to call our regulations roadshow, meeting with various stakeholder groups to get their direct feedback. We want to thank all those who have participated. Board of Governors, you can anticipate revisions and a 15-day additional public comment because we have received and are receiving helpful feedback from the field about text and language changes that we can make in a few places. So do anticipate some revisions coming back to you for second read. And we did just recently present this to Consultation Council just last week. So with that, we can take down the slides, open it up to questions and comments. I will note for the Board of Governors as I quickly ran through that, you do have the full text within your digest. And then in the appendix of the slide deck, you have a more detailed set of slides that goes through each section of the revisions and highlights what was revised in each section. But with that, I will hand it back over to you, President Haynes.
Thank you. The public hearing on item 5.1, the proposed amendments to the California Code of Regulations, Title 5, concerning work experience education is now open. The purpose of the hearing is for the Board of Governors to receive comments and testimony from members of the public regarding the proposed regulatory action. At this time, the floor is open for comment from the public.
The public comment period for item 5.1 is now open. We will begin with Sacramento, then Los Angeles, and conclude with virtual comments. In the interest of time, you will have a maximum of 2 minutes. Vice President Costa, are there any comments in Sacramento?
Yes, we have Dolores Davidson.
Good afternoon, Board President Haynes, Vice President Costa, Chancellor Oakley, members of the board. I'm Dolores Davison. I'm the president of the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges. The one date that Vice Chancellor Lowe left out of that is that when I first served on 5C, which was then known as SAC, starting in 2014, this was on the agenda. It was on the agenda when I chaired 5C in 2016-17, and it has been on the agenda ever since. The Academic Senate is extraordinarily grateful to the members of 5C, to the Chancellor's Office, and specifically to Jan Young and Eric Shearer, who have taken this across the finish line and brought it to you for hearing. And we're very much looking forward to this being approved and continuing the great work that we're looking at work-based experience. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there other public hearing members?
There are no additional comments in LA and there are no hands raised.
So there are no other public members of the public who would like to speak on this matter?
That is correct.
Okay, hearing none, this public hearing is closed. This concludes the public hearing on this matter. Do we have any questions from our board? Hearing and
I will.
seeing.
Member Shabazian? Just briefly, I wanted to thank, it sounds like there's a number of people who've been working on this issue for maybe 7 or 8 years. So thanks to all of those people. It seems like this would be a great step forward for students to be employed, but in ways that are more closely coupled with their education and aligned with their curriculum of their program. So looking forward to this. Thank you.
Thank you. There is no action on this item. It will come back to us after we receive public comment. So we are now in the information and reports. We have item 6.3, the Vision for Success Spotlight, the 2022 State of the System Report. Chancellor Oakley.
Thank you, Board President Haynes. And I'm going to move over here for the presentation so I can see the slides as they're up on the screen. I want to thank the board again for the opportunity to have this update on the state of the system and to focus on the vision for success and the goals and commitments that we made several years ago. And let me first begin my comments by reflecting on some of the comments I heard earlier. First, let me just again thank Governor Newsom because his roadmap for higher education now calls on all of the systems of public higher education to pursue equity for every student and to do that with the urgency that it deserves. So this is not just the California community colleges that are engaging in these conversations. We may be ahead as we should, but these are conversations that are happening with all three systems. And then finally, I'd be remiss if I didn't say something about a comment earlier. I'm very proud of the Chancellor's Office team led by the Deputy Chancellor and all of our Vice Chancellors and the General Counsel for doing the work that they're doing and for bringing these items before the Board of Governors. And let me just say very plainly that hollow threats of litigation are not going to deter nor slow progress toward equity for every student. Threats of litigation may make some people feel bigger than they are, but they're not going to influence what we do here. So we're going to continue to push forward. And I think the presentation on the Vision for Success goals will highlight the importance of the work that we're doing. So let's begin the presentation. If I can ask slides to come up. All right, next slide. So as a reminder, the Vision for Success was adopted in September of 2017. And the quote here sort of encapsulates the need for the Vision for Success and the desire to have a broader system of support for our students. Next slide. These are the vision goals. I won't go into them with any detail. You all know the goals. We've talked about them quite a bit over the years and the commitments that support those goals. Next slide. This is a timeline that just reminds us of where we've been and where we are now. Again, we began this conversation in 2017 with the Board of Governors adopting the Vision for Success. We then began the process of implementing a number of different initiatives, reforms, and frameworks, including the guided pathway framework. That was AP 705, the introduction of the student-centered funding formula, streamlining transfer agreements, and then we began to launch into reforming the Cal Grant system. Moving forward into 2019, Board of Governors adopted the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Integration Plan. We began those efforts. And then, of course, we had a pandemic along the way. And throughout that pandemic, the board acted to support our colleges and our districts and our students to help them continue to learn and to progress through their educational journey. The Board of Governors in 2021 adopted the ethnic studies requirement and policy to strengthen the faculty and staff diversity. There were changes made to the Cal Grant system that opened the door to many more California community college students. We issued the economic impact report, which highlighted the value that our system creates for the great state of California. And we continue to progress to now as we continue to push for organizational changes. We've even made changes in the California Community College Chancellor's Office to align ourselves with the Vision for Success. Next slide. This graph just tries to encapsulate both the complexity of everything we're trying to do and how we're trying to align that complexity. We're talking about policy and the way we're trying to connect policy, fiscal reforms, and aligning program and support infrastructure to support the 4 pillars of the Guided Pathways framework in order to achieve the goals. And obviously, and most importantly, that goal is to improve the outcomes for our students, to improve their lives and the lives of their families going forward. Next slide. So let me dive into the goals. First goal, Vision for Success, goal 1, to increase degree or credential attainment. See the progress that we've made over time. We've consistently been increasing this, and we have actually attained this goal and surpassed the goal, which is good news. So each, and as you see here, you'll see the last year of data change from slide to slide, and I'll explain why, but this one is as of 2020, 2021. And again, the goal aligns with the work that we've been doing to increase the number of students obtaining a credential. This is no small feat, so I want to thank the colleges, the districts, the faculty and staff leadership that's been doing the work to actually make this happen. So when we get to the retreat later in the year, we will work with the board to discuss where we go from here with this goal. I think the goal of credential attainment remains important. It remains important for us helping to achieve the governor's goal. But I think we'll have to revisit where we want to land in future years, increasing this goal. Next slide. The next slide is on transfer. Again, a topic we've been talking a lot about over the years. I'm proud to say that this year, once again, we have increased transfer to the CSU and to the UC by 4%. That's a little more than 3,500 students that we have increased the number of students transferring to the CSU or UC. These are important gains. We are still not keeping pace with where we want to be, but the increases continue. Last year, we had an annual increase of 3%. This year, it's 4%. So that's good news. However, I will caution the board and the public that when we come to this question next year, we expect to see the impacts of the pandemic on these numbers. We have seen in national trends based on the fall 2021 transfer data that COVID impacts are resulting in fewer community colleges transferring to four institutions. Matter of fact, we see some of this concern reflected in UC's data. We've heard some of the concerns in the CSU data. We won't know for sure what the impact is or if there is an impact until next year, but I want to caution us that we may see those impacts in future years. Yes, Board Member Epstein.
Yeah, I just, on the first goal, you had 2021 data, and this one it only goes up to 1920. What's the reason?
Yes, so the difference is the timing of the data. So the transfer process does not conclude until the student is enrolled. Their institution was typically not until the fall after the term that they transferred. So the data lags. We need to get that data back, and it takes about a year. So it lags about a year from the other data that we saw previously.
Just curious, but why does it take a year?
Because the student has to actually be accepted and enroll. And so by the time we get that data back, it's about a year from that point. Next slide, please. So unpacking this a little bit more is the different levers that go into increasing transfer. This board is keenly aware that increasing transfer is a function of not only the California community colleges and the work that we do, but the work that's done at CSU and the UC and the capacity they have. And so we have been limited by capacity to a certain extent. We have been constrained by their capacity. Certainly at the most popular campuses that students choose, whether those be CSUs or the University of California. We've continued to be heavily engaged. Matter of fact, the University of California recently held a public engagement meeting at UC Davis's Sacramento City College Center. And we heard testimony about what challenges remain in transferring students to the University of California. Ultimately, we need to increase capacity at those two institutions. On the other hand, the work that's happening internally in the California community colleges, as reflected by the number of associate degree for transfer, I have to give praise to our faculty and staff because those numbers continue to rise at a rapid pace. As a matter of fact, it's been a 74% improvement in the associate degree for transfer from our base year. So that's been a significant amount of improvement. And these are students that are transfer ready. So as you can see, this significantly outpaces the number of students transferring to CSU and UC. So what that means for us is I'm going to ask the board to engage in a conversation about transfer at the retreat. I believe we need to start thinking about how we open up the aperture, looking at our private, nonprofit, independent institutions to ensure that we're maximizing transfer to those institutions and other institutions as well. We are going to continue to increase the number of transfer-ready students. That's the good news. I think we're going to need to really think about how we increase the opportunities that they have to transfer. And that's not an easy problem to solve, but I think it's worth us engaging because just looking at CSU and UC transfers alone will not give us a complete picture given how, I don't know a better word to express how slow their progress is of increasing capacity.
Yeah,
Yes, board member.
I'm just wondering if somebody knows.
Oh, I'm
Is there a
sorry.
question, LA?
Sure, Chancellor Oakley, I was just wondering, do you think these are, just so I understand this data, these are folks that are eligible, but we know are not transferring? They finished their associates and that's it? Or they may be transferring to private institutions, not the CSU and UCs? I just want to make sure I understand that what this
So,
data is saying.
So what this slide is saying is that the increase in the number of transfer-ready students as measured by achieving an associate degree for transfer is significantly outpacing the growth in the number of students transferring to the CSU and UC. Some of these students are transferring to other institutions. That's not shown in this graph, and at the retreat we can unpack that a little bit more. But as you recall, the goal is transfer to CSU and UC, and I think we did that on purpose. But given the increased growth in the associate degree for transfer success that we're having, I do think we need to take a broader look at where our students are transferring and how we increase opportunities outside the CSU and the UC.
Okay, thanks.
Member Epstein?
In light of the lack of capacity at the CSU and UCs, have we done any research on whether or not our students who transfer are willing to do an online degree so they can stay at home and still earn a 4-year degree? Is that something we've ever looked at? Do we have any information about it, whether that's a viable pathway?
I know I have Dr. Hetz in the background, so I'll have him answer the question after I give you my 2 cents. Certainly within the CSU and the UC, there's been ongoing demand for more and more online options, given the challenges that students have faced. And even now that they're coming back in person, there still seems to be demand for at least hybrid opportunities to continue their education. What I can say from the data that we've seen is that if you judge by the types of institutions that our students are transferring to outside of the CSU and the UC, there is clearly a demand for online education because the top 10 non-CSU and UC transfer destinations in 2020 were Western Governors University, Arizona State, Southern New Hampshire, and those are all predominantly online. So I think that gives us an idea of how our students are pursuing, what options are pursuing. Dr. Hetz, I know you're on, and do you have anything to add to that?
I would just add one thing, and that is when we've asked students what their preferences are, generally speaking, students express a variety of preferences for their course modality. About a quarter of them will express a strictly online preference. A quarter of them will express a strictly in-person preference, and about half of them will express a desire for a flexible hybrid opportunity. And so there is absolutely reason to believe that some of our students would welcome an opportunity to take a fully online degree, but there would be a lot of students that would like other options as well.
Has that data changed in the last 2 years?
That's the most recent data.
Were we asking that 2 years ago?
I do not believe so. I would have to go back and check, but we have not had a robust long-term set of questions asking students about their preferences for different modalities.
Can I just add to that, as we're going to be talking more about the transfers? I think we really need to, and Chancellor Oakley mentioned that we're going to have more graduates. We really need to think about our own baccalaureate system. Students in the system love community colleges, and they would love to stay and get their degree on a campus that they already know. So I think this is really our opportunity to streamline the baccalaureate degree to make sure that students are not dropping out, but stay in the system and get their bachelor's.
The only challenge with that, I'll just leave my editorial, is that right now our baccalaureate degree is very narrow based on agreement from UC and CSU that's focused on careers that they do not offer. And while I absolutely agree that if we expanded those most desired majors on our campuses, we would have comers to that. But that's a hill. No, that's a mountain that we would have to begin chipping away at that, and not without a drag out fight, to be really honest.
The good news, again, giving credit to the Newsom administration, is in the compact, in the roadmap, there is a new agreement between community colleges, CSU and the UC, to improve the flow of data on transfer students. So we will have more data on the students that choose to transfer, those who were eligible to transfer but didn't enroll. So we'll have a lot more data that we can ask questions about to give us a better idea of what we need to do different. But nonetheless, I think while the associate degree for transfer slide is great news, and again, these are unduplicated numbers, so these are students who achieved at least one. It presents us with the challenge of making sure that we're doing everything we can to create opportunities for them to transfer to and obtain their four-year degree. So we will have much more to talk about when we potentially revise this goal later this year. Next slide. So the vision for success goal 3 is to reduce the average units accumulated by students who complete degrees to 79. And you can see the slide there. There is stubborn progress, albeit progress. And this gives me a chance to remind the board that this is the most lagging indicator that we have because it will take some time for the changes that we've made to really take hold in the entire student population. And you have a lot of students who are in our system who were carrying a significant amount of units. So the slow progress, I think, leads to frustration, as it should, but I would remind us all, even remind myself, that this goal is impacted most by all the different reforms that we're putting in motion. The continued implementation of AB 705, the continued work that's happening around the guided pathway framework to streamline the journeys of students and to increase the amount of aid accessible by California community college students. Those three things we need to continue to push. As time goes on, I expect that this progress will continue and we'll begin to see some acceleration over time. But this is the most stubborn of all of the indicators. The good news is that we are going in the right direction. So I will take that as a win for now and continue to press our colleges to implement the reforms that we've been talking about.
Yes.
Sorry, another question.
Chancellor Oakley, can
Yes.
I ask a question about this particular goal? I know that I've asked it before and I cannot remember the response, so I apologize. But is this for all associate degrees or only those that would be at the level of 60 units? Because a number of our career and occupational fields have associate degrees that require much greater than 60 units to complete to be eligible for licensure and practice in nursing, dental hygiene, and things like that. So I'm wondering, as we look at trying to reduce this number, should it be solely focused maybe on ADTs or only on those associate degrees for which only 60 units are necessary?
So before I answer, I will let Dr. Heads comment on what's in the number.
Thank you for that question. It is all of the first degree that a student earns. So it includes all ADTs and any other local associate degrees. So it would include all the degrees of which you were speaking.
Yes, and I will add that I think your comment is well taken. We do have some programs that require more than 60 units to complete. However, those are a small part of the overall landscape of the programs we're looking at. And some of those students accumulated a number of credits before they even entered their program of study. So I think that we need to continue to work with our colleges to ensure that even if a student enters a program that requires more than 60 units, that we try to minimize the number of units accumulated that are outside that program of study, that were not necessary to transfer or to achieve that educational goal. So I think we can talk more about how we look at those programs, but I think broadly speaking, they are a small percentage of the students that are in this data.
I have a recollection that at one point the original number was really over 90, and how did, am I remembering this correctly, that we had to readjust it because we were wrong, the original estimate was wrong or something?
Yes, we have cleaned up some of these goals because of the improvements or changes to the data that we were collecting. I don't know, Dr. Hatz, if you recall some of the changes that were made along the way in this particular goal.
I do recall those changes quite well. One of the key changes, Member Epstein, that led to that downward change that you are referring to was that we discovered that we were counting all associate degrees for students. So if a student stayed or came back and earned a second degree or third degree or even fourth or fifth degree, that their accumulative units across their entire span was being counted. And so one of the things that we did 2 years ago was to change that so that we were just focusing on students' first degree that they earn with us. And that's when it brought it back down to this level.
Any other questions on this slide?
I'll make a comment.
Yes.
I'll try to state this more succinctly by the time we get to the retreat, but I just wanted to say my intuition is that this goal is a proxy for something else that actually is not directly measuring the thing that we want. And I'm thinking of, like 3 examples. Let's say we have a student who gets a degree with exactly the number of units that they are required to take. We get another student who takes a lot more units and still gets their degree. And then we've got a student who doesn't get a degree with any number of units. To me, the distinction between the first two, whether they took a lot of extra units or not, is not as significant as the distinction between the student who just did get a degree. So I'd rather focus on the degree completion and less on how many units did they take to get there.
Member Shabazian, this was a lengthy conversation we had with the Board of Governors when this goal was created. I think the feeling at the time was unit accumulation was in many cases, and the testimony that we heard from students was units that were not in line with their educational goals. So I do think that we've come a long way since then. The Guided Pathways framework has helped us improve our focus. I think the question will be for our research team, are there ways that we can improve this goal to satisfy your concern? Or is this number still a general proxy to improving the pathways toward their programs of study? So I think that's we can certainly have this discussion again, and I'm sure Dr. Hetz will enlighten us with all of his data at that time.
So I do have a follow-up question, and it goes to this. So will we have the kind of data that can tease out the student who is, by virtue of there not being a sequence of classes in order to meet their major, in order to transfer, is that accumulation of units the result of that versus that they've made a choice about a course that they want to take or a class that they want to take? Because I do know that for many of our students, and that some of this has indeed changed, but students were, the sequencing of the courses were problematic. And so if we're gonna get data, one, I would like to know that piece, because it does matter when we say that for many of our minoritized and students and low income students, that time is a killer, is it killing them because the sequence is off? Which we can fix if we're intentional about it, versus that they've just decided to go and on this pathway, or they've made a change in their major, and therefore that's the result of additional accumulation.
Yes, I think it's an important question. The unit accumulation we view as a lagging indicator of what's going on. The guided pathways framework is the intervention that we put into motion to streamline the pathway and to help students gain access to the courses that they need in a timely manner to get to their educational goal. So I think, when we get together, we can talk about where we're at with the implementation of the guided pathway framework. What challenges do we still face? We can talk about all the work and support that Executive Vice Chancellor Alvarado and her team have been doing to support improving course scheduling, investments we've made in things like Program Mapper. So all those things should be working to address the concern you raised, Board President Haynes. The unit accumulation just tells us, whether or not any of these efforts are making a change. But we can certainly get into more detail once we get together.
Thank you.
All right, next slide, please. Okay, this slide focuses on increasing the number of students who get jobs in their field of study. If you recall, this goal was originally at 69%. Now it's at 76%. We actually achieved this goal in the first year, and then we changed it to reflect the current goal. We continue to see slight progress toward the 76%. And again, this data lags because we need to see students actually leave the system for 1 year before we receive information back of whether or not they were placed in jobs. So again, you see the difference here. This is 2018-19 data versus 2020-21 data. And again, this is because they need to have been outside of the system for a full year before we survey them to get information on where they're working. This is another one of those goals that is a lagging goal and that will likely reflect the impacts of COVID-19 on the job market next year. It's also a goal at the time that the Board of Governors created this goal. The concern was having a goal that focused on economic mobility and getting placed in jobs that paid minimum wage. A livable wage, not a minimum wage. We have more information now, more data now that we may have had when we first issued this goal. So I think it's worth going back and discussing this goal at the board retreat to determine if this still is the right indicator of economic mobility. If not, what other methods are there to measure that in the way our students move around in the job market. However, I think this is still positive news that our programs, our faculty and staff in programs that are designed to prepare students for jobs are having success. And we'll wait and see what next year's data tells us about how the pandemic impacted their progress.
Can I ask a question about the
Yes,
data,
yes.
about the data, just background on how we collect the survey data? Because I don't know all the specifics. Like how big is the group we're surveying? Are we looking for a certain number of people to respond with, to actually get some integrity into the data? I assume it's very much regionally diverse in terms of, and regionally ethically, lots of, you're thinking about diversity more kind of just writ large, but it'd be helpful to just better understand how we're collecting the data.
And I will turn this over to Dr. Hatz.
Taking the mask on and on is always a little adventure. That's a fantastic question. It's like a bread and butter question of what we do. So to harken back to what Chancellor Oakley was referring to, we wait for students have been out of our system for a year. That way, because we have a lot of students who move in and out of our system. And so we're trying to make sure that they have in fact exited the system. So we wait for a year and then we survey all of those students, or we construct a sample that comprises all of the students who've exited. It's administered by the Career Technical Education Outcome Survey, and has a variety of different questions that we ask. And so they do some oversampling to try and make sure that they get representative samples of regions and of different population groups, but it's the entire set of folks that we that have left our system. The one challenge that we do have is that in any of those types of things, we are either sampling by phone or we are sampling via email. And so students who are more likely to have moved, who have changed contact information, we're going to be less likely to be able to sample those students. So there is going to be some underrepresentative of students who are more highly mobile.
Are we thinking through as we think about, continuing to improve our data set, how to reach those folks that maybe we can't get via email, like text, or, lots of people have cell phones, like how are we thinking about that?
So they do actually include phone surveys.
Okay.
So that is part of the process. They will use text prompts to try and reach out to people. I think the challenge that we have is just many of our students change phone numbers as well. They change service providers. It will always be a challenge for us because of the students that we serve. They work very hard to try and make sure that they reach out to students multiple times via multiple different modalities to try and get as many as possible. But we do not get a full representation of the entire state.
Thanks.
Dr. Hetz, is this a self-reported item on the CTEOS, or do we actually link it back to EDD data?
Now, this is a self-reported item. That's an excellent question. The reason it's self-reported is to get away from the kind of friction that you get for students who may work in a particular domain, but in an area of their field of study. So if I got training in information technology and I work in a hospital, when you look at the EDD data, they may look like they work in healthcare, which would say they're not working in their field of study when in fact they are. And so it is a self-reported item that allows the former student to identify whether or not in fact they are working in a field that they were trained for. You're welcome.
Any questions? Okay, let's move to the next slide. So now we get into the last two goals, which are related to equity gaps. The first is equity gaps among underrepresented students. And our goal was to reduce the equity gap by 40% over 5 years and to eliminate the gap in 10 years. The good news is gaps are closing slowly but surely. The challenge in that is that our interventions, the work of faculty and staff on the ground are making an impact for every student group. So all boats are rising, so the gaps remain. So the gaps, the attainment for our underrepresented groups is not closing faster than attainment continues to increase for our group, all groups. We did have one group that did not see growth in closing the equity gap, and that was our Pacific Islander group. And so we're gonna be asking some critical questions about what's going on with this population. We've engaged our Asian and Pacific Islander administrators in the state, and we'll be coming back with more information on what we find happening with this cohort. The way we measure this goal is in cohorts, three-year cohorts. And so again, the good news is, as you can see in the blue bars, in the light blue bars, that's the increase in attainment that we're seeing for all groups across all ethnic and racial backgrounds. The challenge is those yellow bars remain stubborn, even though we are improving outcomes for many of the underrepresented groups on this slide. So we're going to need to continue to double down on our efforts to support our underrepresented groups. Certainly, Changes like AB 705, guided pathways, student-centered funding formula are all impacting this. One missing, very important piece is increasing financial aid and other supports for students in these categories. So that's something that we will continue to work on. As we all know, low-income students, students of color, first-generation students tend to be less resourced and particularly of greater need for access to financial aid. We serve 2/3 of California's undergraduate students, but those 2/3 students receive less than 10% of the total Cal Grant funding. So that remains a challenge for us. Any questions on this slide? Okay, the next slide, please. So this is vision goal number 6, again, related to achievement gaps, but in this case, state regional gaps in achievement. Governor in his roadmap also highlighted this as well, the importance of a recovery with equity and a focus on regions of the state that have historically been left behind. We continue to put a focus on those regions. Again, the good news is similar here, that all regions are rising. The challenge is that our baseline group, the Bay Area, outperformed all the other regions along the way. So again, this is the fact that the Bay Area continues to improve outcomes. It's not a bad thing, but it is continuing to put pressure on the equity gaps that exist. But as you can see, Central Valley, Inland Empire are all making gains, Los Angeles. So that's the good news. So the faculty, staff, the colleges in these regions are doing great work. They're improving outcomes. We just need to continue to find ways to accelerate that work and to improve their outcomes at a faster pace than all of the other groups achieving, especially the Bay Area.
Chancellor Oakley, can I
Yes.
stop you here? So off the top of your head, this may be an unfair question. How do you propose to do that? And I actually, I mean this quite seriously, because rather than using equal, because there are those who want us to use equal, that's the word. We have used the term equity and the definition, if placed into action, would mean you would put forward the resources for those in most need.
Right.
That may indeed not be the reality on our campuses or anywhere for that matter. So is it a matter of us not really being able to do that? Placing it on most need, identifying who and what that is difficult, and there are political implications to that. Or is it something else?
So first of all, the word equal does not appear on any one of our slides.
I
We are
realize
focused
that.
on
It
equity.
appeared in comments
Yes.
and I wanted to.
So the answer to your question is, it is a factor of resources. First of all, let me begin by saying that every college in the system has been under-resourced. There are just clearly some regions of the state that are better resourced than other regions of the state. The governor has recognized this in the work that he and his team are investing in places like the Inland Empire and the Central Valley, things like the Fresno Initiative. And there are other investments that they are making to improve the amount of resources in the most under-resourced regions, which aligns with our goals. So it is a function of resources. And so what we have done is we have embedded the Vision for Success goals, the 3 regions that we've prioritized in our requirements for how we support providing resources to the state. I think, again, increasing Cal Grant support would help in these areas. And so it's a matter of looking at every resource that we have and trying to figure out how this graph influences how we distribute resources. Again, I say that understanding that there is no Bay Area college that's over-resourced. They're all under-resourced. Question is more targeted at what other resources do we need to put into those communities, in addition to resources that we need to put into the colleges. So one example is working with the foundation. The Pritzker donation of $100 million was focused on the 3 regions in the Vision for Success. So we need to continue to compound those efforts, working with the foundation, working with the governor's office, and looking at our own processes. How can we ensure that the most under-resourced communities are getting the resources that they need in greater numbers? Any other questions on that slide? Okay. Next slide, please. So that concludes the portion of the presentation focused on the Vision for Success goals. So let me just reiterate, there is a lot of good news in those slides. A lot of improvements across the board, all ethnic groups, all regions. The work that we're doing, the work that the Board of Governors has set into motion is having an impact. Challenge we're finding is accelerating the impact in the most under-resourced communities amongst the most under-resourced students. So that remains our challenge, remains a motivation to continue to pursue things like Cal Grant reform, increase the amount of Pell available for our students, and to work with the governor's office and the legislature to invest more resources in those communities. And that's something we will continue to do. Okay, so now let me just highlight a few things as I conclude my presentation. First of all, again, equity for every student, it's a matter of intentional design and support. So we need to continue to intentionally design programs and provide support. Understanding that we clearly have a lot of work to do to strengthen equitable outcomes across the system. We need to be clear with ourselves and with our stakeholders about the cultural and behavioral changes we're aiming to influence. Again, part of the challenge you see in the equity gaps is not just a resource issue, it's a cultural issue. And the cultural issues are those that are going to be the most challenging to overcome, but the most important to effectuate change. And so we need to continue to push. Guided pathways continues to be our key tool for reform. Things like AB 705, we need to continue to prioritize and implement with fidelity. And we need to continue to empower our students. We need to continue to empower their voice. I can't think of anything greater that I've seen in my time in the chancellor's office to affect change than the increase in the voice of the student. The more that we hear about their experience, the more we can mobilize support for them. And so I'm hoping that we can continue to do that, and then also continue to support our faculty and our staff to do this work. Next slide, please. The pandemic and demographic trends, that's what's coming on the horizon. We're going to be spending time, hopefully this fall, focused on the trends that we see happening. And some of these trends are going to be challenging to our system. State's population is declining. K-12 enrollment is declining. It's projected that we're going to see an 11.4% decline in K-12 enrollment by 2031. We're going to need to prioritize not only the students currently coming out of K-12 into our system, but as important, we're going to have to prioritize those adult working learners that are out there. That will make the bulk of any enrollment growth that we see in the future. And we're, quite frankly, still not doing enough to address that issue. I think Board Member Epstein brings up an important point, which is what are we doing to increase our capacity to serve learners, whether they're in person, online, in competency-based education models. We need to continue to increase the tools that we have to reach those students. So those are the challenges that we're going to face over the next coming years. And we're going to need to continue to prioritize equity even in the face of those challenges. Next slide. These are just a few quotes that we hear from some of our students. Again, giving us the hope and the mindset to continue to acknowledge the work that we need to do. And we need to continue to account for those social determinants that we continue to touch on. It's not just about what happens when they reach campus. It's about everything that happens to our students in their lives, in their educational journey, that we have an opportunity to lean into. Next slide. Again, intentional design, centered design for an equitable recovery. We're emerging from a pandemic that has directly impacted the lives of our most vulnerable, most under-resourced students. We need to continue to focus on issues like mental health, build support networks, provide for financial stability, and we have the structures to do that. Student-centered funding formula, DEIA initiative, guided pathways, equitable placement. All these things need to continue to come together. We need to do it with urgency and to continue to weave the DEI principles in everything that we do. Next slide. This is just a quote from Jessica Lopez, who maybe some of you met when we're doing our day of advocacy with our students. She's an amazing student at Coastline College. And she made it very clear to everyone she talked to that day that without access to online courses, she wouldn't be able to participate in her education. So she credits Coastline and the flexibility that they provided her. And she's just one of tens of thousands of voices out there that we need to continue to listen to and to lift. Next slide. Job creation is obviously key. California community colleges are the biggest provider of workforce training in the state. We need to step up to that challenge. We've already supported nearly 1.5 million jobs in the state of California. We need to continue to lean into that part of our mission as we recover from this pandemic. Next slide. And just another reminder of how important we are to the state of California. $128 billion at least of annual economic impact to the state of California. We have that opportunity. We are serving Californians from the Oregon border to the Mexico's border and every border in between. We have that opportunity to continue to support the state of California in the recovery from this pandemic. Next slide. Proud to say that we are leading by example. We've become a national model on the implementation of guided pathways. We continue to lead California's DEIA reforms and efforts. We are influencing the governor's recovery with equity in higher education efforts, and we're a national leader in working to end the legacy of gatekeeping in higher education through remedial education reform. So it's lots for us to be proud of. Next slide. And we're also influencing our partners across the country. Again, by prioritizing equitable Cal Grant system, it's been gaining ground. Last year, we opened the door to 130,000 more community college students who became eligible to receive financial assistance. That's a big deal. That's 130,000 lives that we directly improved. We need to continue to build on that. We influenced the way that the federal government allocates pandemic relief, and we're leading the effort to design student-centered housing experience for our students by building more student housing, by securing $1 billion in investment in the 2021-22 budget. So we need to continue to push on all these fronts. Next slide. And I have to take a moment to thank the foundation for their direct support. $9 million directly to students at 115 colleges. They've supported our recovery directly. 648,000 community college students provided with technology support, resources to ensure learning continuation during the pandemic. 242,000 students served through the Wellness Ambassador Program. Our foundation is making a significant impact, and I want to make sure and recognize them as well. And one stat that's not on there is $7 million of wages were paid to students through work-based learning that the foundation has been supporting and sponsoring. That's $7 million of economic impact directly to the communities that these students are in. Last couple of slides, the work ahead, the roadmap to equity. We need to continue to elevate the student voice and their experiences. We've had some amazing student leaders. Look forward to the next generation of student leaders to help us do this work. And we need to work to advance the governor's roadmap for the California community colleges that supports and encourages and lifts up the Vision for Success goals, and to do everything we can to meet that 70% post-secondary degree and certificate attainment goal amongst our working age Californians. Last slide. Next slide. Again, this is about policy change with fidelity. I'm asking the board to hang with us on the policy reforms. They're having an impact, so let's continue to push forward. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And let me end by again just saying a big thank you to our faculty leaders, staff leaders, our administrators, trustees, and most importantly, our student leaders for advancing the vision for success.
Thank you, Chancellor. I'm going to open this up for board comments. I just, again, would like to make note of the time. It's 4 minutes after 4. We still have 2 items on the agenda to get through. So if there are any burning desires from our board members relative to questions, please share them and be succinct.
My hair's on fire.
Board Member Epstein, you have a question? Okay, good. Anyone in Los Angeles, our board members that may have a burning desire to ask the Chancellor a question?
I do not see it.
All right, thank you. Then is there any public comment?
The public comment period for item 6.3 is now open. We will begin with Sacramento, then Los Angeles, and conclude with virtual comments. In the interest of time, you'll have a maximum of 2 minutes. Vice President Costa, are there any comments in Sacramento?
No comments.
Thank you. There are no comments in LA and there are no hands raised at this time.
Thank you very much. This is an information item. I want to thank the Chancellor for his wonderful and eye-opening report. We're going to go to our item 6.2, which is the May revision state budget and state and federal advocacy update. We have Executive Vice Chancellor Navarrete and Vice Chancellor O'Brien. You already heard how much time we still have. Do your best to be as succinct as you can. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chancellor Oakley, President Haynes, Vice President Costa, members of the Board of Governors, Lizette Navarrete, Executive Vice Chancellor, Institutional Supports and Success. Here pleased to provide a May revision update. I will go quickly auctioneer style in the interest of time, but if you have any questions, I will pause before we transition to our state and federal update. Next slide, please. And so as you've heard, this update is essentially a 3-part update. We'll talk about the state budget. We'll give you an overview on state legislation and then some context of some important pieces we want to raise to your attention on the federal update, and those will all be covered. Those pieces will be covered by Vice Chancellor O'Brien. The May revision came out just over a week and a half ago. And where we are on the process, I want to begin with that so you can get a sense of how quickly things will move. The budget subcommittees that really focus on higher education have been meeting. They started meeting nearly 3 days after Governor Newsom released the May revision. And they expect to take final actions within the next coming weeks. We are still monitoring whether there will be a conference committee But nonetheless, we expect final actions on a 22-23 state budget to be taken by June 15th. And then considerations, and then we move quickly into implementation because we know there's a lot of important opportunities ahead. Next slide. And opportunities really is a key theme of what we're seeing in this budget. You heard extensively of some of those, how we can leverage that through the governor's proposed roadmap for California's future that includes 4 key components, very intentionally aligned to the vision for success and building on the great work that's already happened at our local colleges and at the state level by prioritizing things like educational outcomes, advancing equity, increased intersegmental collaboration, and workforce preparedness. The roadmap really provides opportunities for these areas. Next slide, please. I want to highlight a couple that I want to elevate, and I want us to celebrate and recognize the great opportunity we have ahead. As I mentioned, the vision for success is embedded into the governor's roadmap. And what this does, it means that it prioritizes this not just for us, so it's not what we're doing, but it's what we're doing in partnership with our state leaders, with our colleges, and elevates it to the level of the governor, the state legislature. So we have partners in this important work. It ensures that there's an unwavering commitment to efforts that have already been put in place, either through legislation or through key initiatives led by the California community colleges. I want to call attention to something that really weaves in some of the themes that we've heard in some of our conversations, particularly around transfer, and that the roadmap enables a redesign of data sharing agreements to increase and support transfer so that we better understand our successes and areas that need improvement. This is huge, and that language around data sharing agreements and strengthening those is included in the roadmap and in the compacts proposed for UC and CSU. We could gain a lot from having that collaboration more intentionally defined, and so we look forward to that. So let me move on to other elements in the governor's budget that I want to call your attention to. Next slide, please. Massive ongoing resources that we've seen are historic, as Chancellor Oakley mentioned in the opening remarks, the largest COLA we've seen in 40 years. Some new resources around base increases, I'll cover those, and faculty health, recognizing the important need right now. Next slide, please. We also see substantial one-time funding, particularly focused on reducing our deferred maintenance backlog, and a discretionary block grant that calls out some areas of investment. Next slide, please. Let me focus on community college apportionments. The apportionments are various parts that really are unrestricted funds that really cover the core operations of colleges, including salaries and wages. So as we see inflation go up or a district operating cost going up, it's important that these increases keep pace. And so we're glad to see the COLA of 6.56, roughly 493 million. Per student funding rate increases under the SEFF of 250 million ongoing. Basic allocation increase of 125 million that really recognizes the technology reliance of our campuses. Some resources for growth in anticipation that this supports all aspects of the SEFF gains, including any increases that we see in associate degrees for transfer, AB 705 compliance, degree completion, credentials, you name it. And then in the governor's proposal is still the proposal for the floor to begin around 24-25, the SCFF floor being specific. So let me hear more. Next slide, please. And then we know that the important work around student equity and achievement is just beginning and is picking up great momentum. So we see two key investments in this area, a 5% increase around student equity and achievement, and $10 million ongoing support for equal employment opportunity programs and best practices. I've shared with many of you before that previously EEO programs are funded based on penalties. It doesn't necessarily incentivize doing good work because you'd have to break rules in one area in order to get equity, equal employment equity funds. And so we're glad to see the recognition that these funds are necessary for the ongoing work and commitment that our colleges are making in many of the discussions that we've already had today. Next slide, please. And then in recognition of the need for an equitable recovery, including re-engaging many students that have been affected by the pandemic and have either stopped out or hesitant to return to our campuses, $150 million one time for student enrollment and retention, really focus on strategies that are more high touch, that really engage prospective students and former students that have stopped out. And the recovery and what it takes to recover for our districts and students and campuses really is can look very differently on various campuses. And so in recognition of that, the governor proposes a $750 million discretionary block grant one time that districts may spend over 5 years. Funding would go out using 21-22 actual FTEs. Let me share a little bit more on the next slide around what that includes. The purposes of these dollars would be for professional development, campus security, technology infrastructure, paying down obligations, and pension costs, student mental health and wellness, amongst others. And it's really deemed around what the local board sees as an important and valuable priority for the local districts. Next slide, please. And then in alignment with the conversation that we've been having for the last 9 months around our need to really bring up to date our technology resources, our technology infrastructure, and the attention we pay to these modalities and platforms. The governor invests $75 million one time and $25 million ongoing for these upgrades, really with a two-part effort, one around the state level actions and monitoring, and then the local resources that are needed for ongoing implementation and action around technology modernization to secure our students' data and ensure that faculty feel safe as they engage in technology in their classrooms. Next slide, please. College affordability remains a topic, though we'll share more around areas that need further attention, but we see a $10 million ongoing augmentation for financial aid offices in tandem for a lot of the great work and important and necessary efforts to connect our students to aid, especially as costs go up. Next slide, please. And then, as I highlighted, for part-time faculty supports, it never ceases to amaze me to tell you that this program was previously funded at only $490,000. And so the governor proposes $200 million ongoing so that we can incentivize more districts to participate in this program. This is an ongoing conversation to ensure that the language mirrors the flexibilities that districts need to create a true incentive. So we'll keep monitoring this, but we're in support of this important effort. Next slide, please. And several investments around strengthening academic pathways. Let me go into detail on some of those. Next slide, please. $105 million one time to implement Common Course numbering. As you may recall, there was an investment in the 21-22 budget, but we really had highlighted that it wasn't enough given the massive undertaking that this would mean and the importance of getting this done right. And so we're glad to see an investment in $105 million one time. Resources for $225 million one time for an intersegmental pathways approach. that allows us to focus on some of these points that we discussed earlier in Chancellor Oakley's State of the System address, such as reducing excess unit, ensuring that pathways are clear for students. And then in our continued and important work around transfer, you may recall that AB 928 transfer reform bill approved last year did not come with any resources for colleges, but the undertaking to get that done right really requires an investment of both time and resources that were essential. So this provides $65 million to do that important work. Next slide, please. And our deferred maintenance backlog, we're one of the systems that continues to whittle that down, yet we haven't been able to keep pace, and we have an important work to get that down before costs continue to escalate. And so the governor proposes 1.5 billion one time for deferred maintenance with an emphasis on energy efficiency projects on our campuses, recognizing the purchasing power and the footprint that we have and using that to address climate change issues. Next slide, please. And you may recall when the board was considering the system budget request, we highlighted some of the inequities that continue to exist around our capacity to support our districts and the important work that they do. And so as the largest system of higher ed, we still have the smallest central office to support districts in their work. Next slide. On top of that, we've also seen a substantial increase in the number of programs that we operate, up from 59 in 2014 to 109 this year, without many new additional positions other than one in 1920. Next slide. So we're glad to see this recognition and an investment in positions just to help us keep pace with the current workload. Doesn't actually even consider some of the new elements, but we're still glad to see this nonetheless, with 26 positions proposed for 22-23. I'll add that these resources do not compete with districts as they are general fund and not Prop 98. Next slide, please. And so where do we have areas of opportunity? One of them that we were glad to see in the 21-22 budget, but haven't seen additional resources, new additional resources in 22-23 budget is around student housing. You may recall that this grant program we're very grateful for is oversubscribed. There's lots of interest in ensuring that colleges can provide affordable student housing to students. The approach taken by the Department of Finance would propose funding 75 projects out of the 21-22 funds and propose funding for 5 projects. But we know that there are 7 projects that are shovel ready that with an investment of $350 million one time, a great use of one-time dollars, could nearly double the number of affordable student housing beds that we have in the community college system. So this is an area of continued advocacy for the Chancellor's Office with the partnership of many districts that are joining us in elevating the important opportunity that we have in using one-time resources for infrastructure that will have long-term benefits. Next slide, please. And Vice Chancellor O'Brien will share more about this, but echoing the important points made by Chancellor Oakley that Cal Grant reform needs to be one of our primary goals and priorities. As our system, as our state recovers with equity, we need to look at the investments that our students need to be able to participate in education. And I can tell you that for many students, working often takes precedent because it is key survival for many of our student communities, particularly students of color. So we want to enable students to participate in education, need an investment in financial aid that can keep pace with inflation and allow them to really focus on their education. So this will continue to be an area of priority and advocacy in the next few weeks of the budget that will move very quickly, but we hope you'll join us in the fight for these resources and join us. And I want to commend the Student Senate for California Community Colleges for their tremendous work in this area. You'll see them walking the halls almost every day, elevating this as an important point, as it should be. Next slide, please. And then from here, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Vice Chancellor David O'Brien after this. But let me just highlight a few key points. The Senate and the Assembly are going to weigh in on some of these priorities. And they are highlighting that are in our benefit. One is around adding more resources to affordable student housing. The Senate seeks 1.5 billion in increases, and the Assembly is joined also in championing Cal Grant reform. So we're glad to see these two priorities. With that, next slide, and I'll turn it over to my colleague, David O'Brien.
Questions before we go?
Can we take a couple of questions before we move on to the federal?
Yes, please. Apologies for that.
Member Epstein, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm not sure if this is for Executive Vice Chancellor Navarrete or the Chancellor, but I'm looking at the governor's CCC roadmap, and he has goals related to dual enrollment, and I think there was one other one that we don't have in ours. You know, is this something that we should be considering? You know, kind of adjusting our goals to fit that, because you know, I know that we're very supportive of dual enrollment, for example.
So yes, we've been discussing dual enrollment in the Governor's Post-Secondary Council for quite some time. He sees it, his team sees it as a way to increase the number of students in high school gaining access to college level courses. We agree. We don't see that as a goal in and of itself. We see that as an aspect of the work that will be supporting reducing the number of units accumulated, strengthening pathway toward achieving an educational goal, and increasing the number of students that obtain a credential. So we see that as supporting our goals, but at this point, I don't see that it would be a goal in and of itself.
But I presume since it's in the governor's plan, that that's something that we will, you know, advocate in communications with the system.
Yes, and it will be a priority going forward to increase amount of resources going toward increasing dual enrollment. And it's also pulls in the K-12 system.
Thanks.
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead.
I was just, you know, former Public Works Commissioner. Our department used to contract or manage the construction of primarily roads and bridges and other items of infrastructure. So my question is, who is going to manage the construction, the housing constructions associated with this? Is it going to be a centralized effort? Because oftentimes districts don't have the capacity to have to manage and have adequate oversight in terms of construction projects.
I'm happy to elaborate a little bit about that. So some of the projects that are under consideration have produced evidence that they have the capacity to manage these projects. So these are all locally driven. So that's why you also see 25 districts that have applied for planning grants, and under the Department of Finance proposal, would each receive planning grants. That gives them the capacity to start planning and thinking through the total cost of ownership, where the facility would go, how to connect it to student services, and ultimately for student success. So you really see a two-part effort in the program and then the grants and how they're proposed to receive resources.
Thank you, Lizette. But you know, oftentimes the areas that don't have that capacity have the greater need. They don't have the planners or, you know, the administrative capacity to compete. So how are we going to assist those areas?
A couple of key points I'll highlight. One is that, and again, we're glad to see planning grants that gives them initial resources that they wouldn't otherwise have had. The other is I want to commend the various members of the Affordability Task Force, Affordable Student Housing Task Force, that are really working with us to think through not only the scaffolding that we put in support of this program statewide, but the professional development and technical assistance that we would need to provide to districts looking to engage. And so the board will receive an update and recommendations later this year from that task force. And one of those recommendations will be technical assistance with the focus on districts that we want to support in enabling their participation in affordable student housing.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't see any other hands raised. We can proceed with the federal update.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Board Member Harris. Thank you, Dr. Navarrete, David O'Brien, Vice Chancellor of Government Relations. And recognizing the time, I will be very quick. We can go ahead and skip 2 slides. The first slide is just the usual one with an overview of the number of bills we're tracking right now. Long story short, a lot. As Dr. Navarrete and Chancellor Oakley have mentioned, one of our main advocacy priorities is around Cal Grant reform. So we're strongly supporting Assembly Bill 1746 by Assemblymember Medina, which would the legislative piece, the companion to the budget component that Dr. Navarrete referenced. We're also pleased to note that Senate Bill 1141, our sponsored legislation around expanding access to the AB 540 non-resident tuition exemption is continuing to advance. Very thankful that Immigrants Rising has come on board as a co-sponsor of that legislation with us. The next slide is probably where we'll spend a lot of our time because it's been a couple of board meetings since we spoke about this, but I just want to remind the board that since the last Board of Governors meeting, the Chancellor's Office has adopted an official position of support on Assembly Bill 1705 by Assemblymember Jackie Irwin related to equitable placement in AB 705. And you may recall the previous meeting, we were discussing a prior version of the bill with which we did have some concerns and felt that it went a little bit farther than it was necessary. And I'll discuss those a little bit in a moment. First, just want to note as well that one of the main concerns we have heard from stakeholders and colleagues in the field, including our faculty partners, is around a lack of sufficient resources to do the specific work behind AB 705 and 1705 as well, and equitable placement such as professional development, tutoring, and other classroom supports such as prerequisites. So we are pleased to note that in addition to this bill, Assemblymember Irwin has also submitted a budget request to provide for a $64 million system-wide block grant, support some of these items such as faculty professional development and co-directed tutoring, as well as critical research around placement practices. Part of that as well, including positions that are part of the governor's budget request that would be involved specifically in some component of monitoring or providing oversight around AB 705 here at the Chancellor's Office. So very, very grateful to someone for her leadership there and pleased to be in support. Next slide, please. Just want to provide a quick update because, again, as you recall, the last board meeting, we weren't ready yet to take a position. We had some concerns regarding Assembly Bill 1705. Here at the Chancellor's Office, really want to thank Drs. John Hetz and Aisha Lowe on our team for helping work on some amendments that alleviated our concern. Among other things, the amendments that have been made to the bill that moved us to a support position clarify that no student will be forced to enroll in English or math courses. And the English and math requirements aren't being added to programs that already have them. Do retain for colleges the flexibility to require concurrent support for students who need it, where there's evidence of its effectiveness, and does allow for developmental or other pre-transfer coursework to be offered where appropriate and where there's data to show that it maximizes student success. So with those, we move to a support position. Colleagues and are aware that this is a very high-profile piece of legislation. There is some controversy in some of our partner organizations and stakeholders have a difference of opinion, but we're continuing to engage in discussions alongside the author's office around potential future amendments to the bill. Next slide, please. Very briefly, two bills that we've adopted a new position on. We always like to make sure we update the board on those. Assembly Bill 2315 by Assemblymember Arambula is an attempt to address the unfortunate phenomenon known as debt naming, which happens to times to individuals who are transgender or gender non-binary identifying in the colleges by ensuring that there's a process for students, staff, and faculty to be able to go by their affirmed name, gender, or both name and gender identity in records where legal there was no requirement for legal documentation. I want to thank FACT for sponsoring this legislation. We're pleased to support it. It's very much in line with our principles. Also want to note that we've taken a position of support on Assembly Bill 2627 related to the ability for local agencies and local community college districts to essentially share contact information about students for the purpose of eligibility for certain public services or benefits. This is essentially just an attempt to reduce those gaps where students may qualify for a service like CalFresh or WIC or other public services that can address the crisis of basic needs, but may not be aware of it. This bill does have robust privacy protections in place to ensure that it's in line with FERPA and other state and federal privacy laws. And we discussed it thoroughly with our general counsel and are pleased to support it. The next few slides, I'll go through really quickly, so let's advance one more around some key federal updates. We discussed previously the America Competes Act, which is a really critical workforce legislation that Congress is debating. One of the things it does that's long been a priority for this Chancellor's Office and the Board of Governors is it extends eligibility for the federal Pell Grant to students attending short-term job training and workforce programs. However, that provision excludes specifically online programs. And that, as we understand, was an attempt by certain members of Congress to try to exclude low-quality for-profit programs, which are often disproportionately online. So our concern, of course, is that the past couple of years of the COVID pandemic, so much of our system has moved to a virtual modality, and many of those courses will be staying that way, or at least in a hybrid format. So we're continuing to advocate for some sort of carve-out, perhaps, for public institutions of higher education within that Pell Grant provision. Next slide, please. The Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, which is known by the very fun acronym WIOA, is the nation's primary workforce education law. Significantly expands funding for workforce programs, including community colleges and strengthening partnerships between our colleges and these one-stop job centers. We're pleased to note that this, which is also a priority of ours, something we've advocated for a long time, it passed the House of Representatives last week and is now in the Senate, the United States Senate, which is famously extremely productive and efficient at passing legislation. So we're confident it'll take just a matter of days. I don't hear laughter down there, but I hope everybody late afternoon sarcasm. Next slide, please. Just want to know, we always like to know a couple of federal grant opportunities, so we put those out there so that our college partners can access them. And of course, you'll have access to these slides if you want to share them. And next slide and final slide is just a note that one of, as you know, our students' main priorities, including Board Member Tarasova, has been a real statewide leader on this issue, is around affordable and accessible access to high-speed internet and technology. And we're very pleased that the White House has launched a program around internet subsidies to low-income households that caps monthly fees of $30 a month. And one of the criteria for eligibility is a household with a Pell Grant recipient. And so that's at getinternet.gov. And again, there's something that we hope a lot of our students will take advantage of. That concludes my presentation, but happy to take any questions as always.
Any questions, board member questions for?
Yeah, a question and a comment.
Yes.
On AB 1705, could you or could somebody elaborate on how that affects the CTE students or students whose goal is an AA degree? I'm glad to see that there was an amendment or a phrase in there that students in programs that had a specialized math requirement wouldn't need to take a transfer level course. But what about the vast majority of CTE students or AA students? Are they going to be pushed into taking a more advanced math course than they would otherwise need without AB 1705?
So if Dr. Hetz is there, I wouldn't mind calling on him perhaps to help out a little bit here. But what I can tell you, board member, is that the recent amendments on 1705 provide that the student will be placed by default into a transfer math course if their program of study can be met by transfer level math. If it cannot, then the amendments provide that they're not expected to be placed in transfer level. I see Dr. Hetz there.
Yes, thank you. To answer your question, I think David already provided, or Vice Chancellor O'Brien already provided some of the critical information. We've designed, or we've helped shape the language to try and protect as many pathways as possible for which a non-transfer level course is appropriate. But for pathways in which a transfer level course would be an appropriate substitute, we want to make sure that that option is being kept open for students so that they have access to that. And so that is the way that the language is designed right now. But there are a number of very explicit carve-outs for a whole variety of students, including the students that you and Vice Chancellor O'Brien have referenced.
Yeah, if I could just say, I am sad about how AB 1705 looks like it will be impacting CTE students and students who have a goal of an AA degree. It seems like they will have reduced options, and individual students will have less ability to choose a course that's appropriate for them. Giving students a say in planning their individual educational path is an important component of building a sense of belonging in our education system. And so I'll leave it at that.
Other board comments, questions?
Yeah, I have one other, more work for Lizette. Again, going back to the housing construction piece, because it's going to be such a big thing, and a lot of people are going to be watching it, even nationwide. So again, I would, and my term is up in January, so this is not about me, but it's really about the board and how the whole program might reflect on the board. So I would suggest that there be some sort of centralized oversight effort. And I also think it would be advantageous to have, a small subcommittee of board members who are briefed regularly on the progress of the construction efforts. And I'm telling you, it will save us all a lot of worry, and also I think probably speed up the process. Again, it's based upon my experience in public sector. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Shaw. I think you'll be very pleased to see with some of the progress that the Affordable Student Housing Task Force has made, including building more robust data set and some overall requirements, but don't want to get ahead of their work. But I think you'll be pleased to see what some of what the recommendations will be later this year that support and meet some of your key goals.
The oversight. Thank you.
And I would just add that we have appointed 5 Board of Governors members to the task force. So hopefully that will be helpful, that we can get our questions answered and your questions answered as well. Seeing no other board members, do we have public comment?
The public comment period for item 6.2 is now open. We will begin with Sacramento, then Los Angeles, and conclude with virtual comments. In the interest of time, you will have a maximum of 2 minutes. Vice President Costa, are there any comments in Sacramento?
Yes, Evan Hawkins.
Good afternoon, President Haynes, Vice President Costa, Chancellor Oakley. Let's get my sea legs going for these long in-person meetings. It's been a while, so if I yawn, please don't take any offense. Appreciate the conversation about all of our colleges being under-resourced earlier. And certainly this budget is an opportunity to make a step in the right direction on providing more funding on a per-student basis for our community colleges. And we're grateful for the Chancellor's Office and their advocacy to increase base funding and for its support of part-time faculty. Healthcare, we believe that there are further opportunities for investment not included in the May revise, including increased funding for MESA, EOPS, and the creation of a Native American Student Services Program. These have been acknowledged in the legislative versions of the budget, and we will be advocating for them. Additionally, we know more work is needed to be done on financial aid, and we are committed to working with the Chancellor's office on all of these issues to ensure increased support for our students. On the roadmap, we have a few thoughts. Certainly, we understand the desire for a uniformed roadmap for higher education, but we're concerned about a top-down approach from the governor's office that may not fully appreciate the role of local expertise in serving our diverse communities throughout the state. We understand the importance of accountability and demonstrating success to policymakers, and we also understand that without local buy-in from those doing the work on our campuses, success could be much more difficult to achieve. We hope the Chancellor's office will advocate to the governor that the voices of local students, faculty, administrators, and staff are critical for the successes of our colleges. A roadmap that could potentially increase initiative fatigue, could potentially overlook community needs, and potentially applies punitive measures may not help us achieve our shared goals. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment on this item?
Member Rawlings, are there any comments in Los Angeles?
There are no public comments in Los Angeles.
I see 4 virtual hands. Gary?
Yes, let's start with Katrina Linden. You have control of your mic and can address the board.
Good afternoon, President Haynes, Chancellor Oakley, and members of the board. My name is Katrina Linden, speaking today on behalf of the Campaign for College Opportunity. As an organization dedicated to increasing community college student success and closing racial equity gaps, we thank the Board of Governors and Chancellor's Office for your deep commitment to racial equity and the success of all community college students. We thank you for your support of AB 1705, and we believe this is a testament to the system's mission of being an open access institution where every individual who enters a California community college is supported with the tools, resources, and guidance needed to access and succeed in transfer level courses. AB 1705 will be vital to not only meeting the goals of the vision for success, but in providing necessary support and guidance to our 116 community colleges as they work to implement racially equitable placement and assessment policy. AB 1705 continues the transformative change AB 705 created by supporting efforts to advance statewide goals of increased student success and racial equity. Thank you for your leadership and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
Next, we have a user just using the name Denise. You have control of your mic and can address the board.
Hello, my name is Denise Castro, calling on behalf of the Education Trust West, and we want to thank the Board of Governors for your deep commitment to equity and the success of California community college students. We appreciate the Board of Governors and Chancellor's Office for expressing support for AB 1705. It builds upon AB 705, which was a transformative bill that led to unprecedented increases in student completion of transfer level courses, and AB 1705 will continue equitable placement and success reforms that have already been demonstrated to advance the California Community College's vision for success goals to ensure persistence, completion, and graduation and transfer, as well as reduce equity gaps. AB 1705 is helping to move the needle forward on equity and transforming the lives of students. Thank you for your leadership.
Thank you.
Next, we have Myra Snell. You have control of your mic and can address the board.
Good afternoon, President Haynes, Vice President Costa, Chancellor Oakley, and the members of the board. I'm Myra Snell, and I'm a professor of mathematics at Los Medanos College and the co-founder of CAP, the California Acceleration Project. CAP is a network of California community college faculty that has been working to reform remediation since 2010. And as English and math faculty, we know that students are much more capable than traditionally assumed, and the remedial courses have not served them as intended. We supported AB 705 in 2017, and we support this year's follow-up legislation, AB 1705. Math and English faculty, counselors, and administrators from 44 colleges signed our letter of support for AB 1705, and I thought it might be helpful to understand the values of the folks that are supporting this legislation. Our letter closed with the following statement of values. We, the others signed, believe in the capacity of our students. We believe that it is the affirmative duty of our colleges to offer students evidence-based options that promote their progress and to discontinue those practices that do not. We believe in dismantling structures, policies, and practices within our colleges that contribute to racial inequity and educational outcomes. We believe in building equity-minded colleges that welcome and empower all students to succeed. And we believe that AB 1705 is aligned with our values. In closing, AB CAP has endorsed
30 seconds remaining.
Member Woman's budget request to support campuses in the Chancellor's office on implementation. And we want to thank Chancellor Oakley and his team for their leadership in implementing AB 705 and in supporting AB 1705. And we thank the board for your ongoing commitment to the vision for success and the call to action against racism. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Jayton Stevens. You have control of your mic and can address the board.
Thank you. Good afternoon, President Haynes, Vice President Costa, Chancellor Oakley, and members of the board. My name is Jayton Stevens. I am a senior staff attorney with Public Advocates Higher Education Equity Team. And I want to thank the Board of Governors and the Chancellor's Office today for your deep commitment to racial equity and your support of AB 1705. AB 705 was a transformational policy whose success was based on a belief that the largely Black and Brown students in the California community colleges were capable of doing college-level work. Yet the implementation of AB 705 has been uneven, and not all students have benefited from its transformation. AB 1705 will provide much needed clarification and guidance to the 116 community colleges across the state and ensure that no matter where a student attends college, they will have the same opportunity for success. AB 1705 will ensure that students are enrolled in transfer level courses where they have the greatest chance of success and ensure that colleges are providing students the support they need to succeed. This policy will be key in ensuring that the colleges can meet the goals of the vision for success. AB 1705 builds upon the transformative change AB 705 created by continuing vital
30 seconds
efforts
remaining.
to advance the California community colleges' statewide goals of increased student success and racial equity. And I thank you for your continued leadership on equitable placement and success.
Thank you.
We have one more speaker, Adrina Rashidi. You have control of your mic and can address the board.
Good afternoon. My name is Adrina Rashidi. I am the MESA Director at Mission College, representing the Community College Association for MESA Directors. We appreciate your support in this morning's grant approval, but the legislature has allocated $10.7 million ongoing for MESA per year. We are short by over $5 million per year and short by over $11 million for fiscal year 21-22 and 22-23 combined. Because the funding isn't what we expected, there have been negative impacts on our program and students. The legislative intent per the governor's budget is that the full $10.7 million be allocated to MESA programs, and currently legislative intent is not being met. We've been engaged with legislators about this, and they have expressed concerns to us that the funding is not being allocated as expected. MESA bridges STEM equity gaps. 60% of our students are Latinx. All of our students are first generation to go to college and low income. These are the students needing strongest support to transfer into STEM degrees. The governor's roadmap clearly lays out the focus on STEM for the community colleges, and this lack of funding will prevent that focus from materializing. Additionally, not releasing funds on time has impacted our programs and students. Our districts have put our funding on hold, and we are receiving it at the end of the year. We can't serve our vulnerable populations when we don't receive funding on time, or when we don't receive the full funding intended by our legislators, the full 10.7 annual allocation. We ask that you make our program whole and fund it on time. We have an unprecedented state budget. There is no reason for our programs to not be whole. We are grateful for
30 seconds remaining.
We are grateful for this morning's approval for the first half of our funds, and we request the remainder of MESA's fiscal year 21-22 and fiscal year 22-23 funds be approved for allocation at the next Board of Governors meeting.
Thank you. Is that the last public comment?
Yes, President Haynes, there are no more hands raised.
All right, thank you. This is an information item. We are close to the 5 o'clock time, and we do have one more information item at 6.4. I'd like to ask presenters who are Executive Vice Chancellor Navarette and Assistant Vice Chancellor Martinez, to try to abbreviate where we can on this item. I apologize in advance, but I'm going to ask nonetheless. Thank you.
Thank you very much, members of the Board of Governors. Again, Lizette Everett, Executive Vice Chancellor. I have the honor today of introducing my colleague, Dr. Cilia Martinez, Assistant Vice Chancellor of Institutional Effectiveness. Before she begins, let me share a little bit more about this effort. So the Institutional Effectiveness Partnership, and IEPI, as we call it, is part of the Institutional Supports and Success Office and collaborates across all Chancellor's Office divisions to support statewide priorities. It is our place to drive innovation in higher ed, and it positions high quality, equity focused technical assistance, professional development, and other tools for us to support districts and our efforts to advance a vision for success. So with that, let me turn it to Dr. Cilia Martinez.
Thank you, Dr. Navarrete. Good afternoon, President Haynes, Vice President Costa, Chancellor Oakley, and members of the Board of Governors. It is my pleasure to be able to join you and walk you through how Institutional Effectiveness Division has been able to redesign and make significant progress within the last year and a half. But before I get started, I do want to thank all of you for your support as leaders of our system. I also want to recognize Board Member Rawlings, who partnered with IEPI last year to help us develop and launch the first Classified Professional Needs Assessment Survey. I will discuss this in more detail during my presentation. And now let's get started, and I will share along the way other collaborations IEPI has made throughout our agency and with our external stakeholders. Next slide, please. I would like to start off by providing you a timeline of the development of IEPI across the years. The Institutional Effectiveness Partnership Initiative was initially designed in 2014 to support colleges and districts to improve their fiscal and operational effectiveness and promote student success. Determined by the state legislature, IEPI was created to provide community colleges with system-wide professional development and technical assistance, and that is including providing support to initiatives that serve especially vulnerable populations such as our veteran students, our foster youth, and incarcerated students. At the start, IEPI focused on 4 major aspects of institutional effectiveness, and this included student performance and outcomes, accreditation status, fiscal viability, and programmatic compliance with state and federal guidelines. These focus areas, then known as a framework of indicators, serve to guide the division's strategic planning and assess to what extent activities serve the needs of the California community colleges. Since the year of its launch, IEPI's components are complementary efforts intended to ensure that California community colleges meet their institutional effectiveness goals. I arrived at the Chancellor's office in late May of 2020 during a pandemic, but since then I've been able to build on the foundation that was already set, and we introduced new learning opportunities for the field, such as the communities of practice that I will discuss a little later, that align with the Vision for Success and the Chancellor's Office priorities. I want to thank Educational Services and Supports Leadership, Executive Vice Chancellor Alvarado, also Vice Chancellors Lowe and Ron O'Shaughnessy for providing guidance as we develop some of these communities of practice. They've truly been integral to informing the work and helping us connect the dots across our agency. Within the last year, we've also elevated equal employment opportunity and developed those expertise to support the local EEO plans that will advance diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility so that we can continue to help our districts move from compliance and empowering them to do this work. Next slide, please. IEPI has also aims to help districts in their journey to achieve the Vision for Success by providing professional learning opportunities to improve their campus ecosystem established by members of their institutions so that they can improve the student academic experience. We want to make sure that through our strategic investments, we are offering leadership development opportunities to support our current leaders, but also develop those new leaders that will help create an ecosystem where our students feel that they belong and feel supported in completing their academic goals. At its core, IEPI plays a critical role in supporting community colleges, the Board of Governors, and the Chancellor's Office in advancing institutional change that improves student outcomes and close those achievement gaps that we often speak about. Recognizing that it is the institution's responsibility to disrupt and really dismantle those systems and structures that have produced unequal outcomes, and not the individual student or communities who have experienced discrimination or marginalization. We want to foster innovation that will support equity-minded practices that will accelerate progress towards equitable outcomes. And lastly, IEPI is well positioned to support colleges in their implementation of those system-wide initiatives to help them get closer to achieving the vision for success. Remaining adaptive and responsive to our colleges' needs that drive institutional action has been an essential part of IEPI's redesign and the new framework. While colleges focus on supporting and working directly with students and improving student outcomes, IEPI is truly focused on helping our colleges create the conditions that will adapt to our students' needs. Next slide, please. As IEPI leads many efforts, we recognize that equally important is how we align the given resources to the district and colleges that put our students first. The strands of policy, program alignment, and fiscal changes that are integrated throughout the framework of guided pathways is how we can clearly connect to the vision success goals. And IEPI intends to continue to support this effort through the intentional professional development and technical assistance opportunities. For example, IEPI has leveraged a partnership with the Strategic Enrollment Management Program to enhance their offerings and help our colleges improve the student experience in a way that facilitates enrollment, persistence, completion, and success. We are moving our colleges from compliance to empowerment and helping them become catalysts that will lead to long-lasting change. Some of the updated STEM topics this year include equity and student-focused STEM planning, the new models and approaches for student onboarding, retention and completion, the critical role of the class schedule in operationalizing colleges' guided pathway work, and aligning enrollment management strategies and practices with the student-centered funding formula. And also the utilization of different teaching modalities, as we know, to promote student retention and effective learning in a hybrid and online environment. This is an intentional attempt for us to create true transformative change and dismantle the current systems that are preventing us from making progress. We are moving towards equity becoming institutionalized into the fabric of our system and moving our colleges to become more accountable and focus on the student outcomes. Ultimately, our goal is to move away from being system-centered and really truly becoming student-centered in order to close the achievement gaps. Next slide, please. So IEPI has 4 strategic focus areas, and the first one is the alignment to the vision for success. Currently, IEPI is focused on monitoring alignment to the legislative intent of IEPI, defined in SB 840 and Ed Code as improving institutional effectiveness and supporting student success, but also aligning the efforts to the vision for success through our internal planning process. Since the goals of IEPI have evolved and extended beyond those named in the legislative intent, such as developing learning opportunities to advance equal employment opportunity and diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility agendas, we've also expanded our portfolio to include leadership development and classified professionals and part-time faculty. In 2021, in order to create a more comprehensive approach to its own goals, including making explicit connections to the vision equity goals as a way to strengthen our impact, IEPI launched a series of communities of practice. These COP areas focus are informed by the core commitments and system-wide program goals and outcomes delineated in the vision for success. The COPs include diversity, equity, and inclusion in teaching and learning, online learning, equitable placement with fidelity, dual enrollment. I know that was mentioned earlier. So yes, we are approaching that work as well. Credit for prior learning and financial aid and basic needs. In addition, we sought and supported capacity building vendor projects focused on CEOs, classified professionals, and faculty to ensure equitable representation of all of our constituents and investments in system-wide professional learning experiences. Furthermore, to advance the call to action, IEPI supported the Courageous Leadership webinar series. This series highlighted lessons learned from our colleges that are leading DEIA efforts on campus. The Courageous Leadership webinar series reached a combined audience of nearly 5,000 community college professionals, stakeholders, and students. The webinars were ultimately developed into video-based learning modules, and they're still accessible in our Vision Resource Center. In total, from July 2020 through June of 2021, IEPI has hosted 36 professional development events covering the following priorities: DEI, innovations in education, guided pathways, financial aid and basic needs, equitable placement, and the student-centered funding formula. We've had a total of over 36,000 participants attend IEPI events during this time period. This really truly represents an 87% increase from the 2019-2020 attendance of a total of about 19,000. So we've undertaken this strategic intervention in our PD architecture in close consultation and coordination with campus leaders, our subject matter experts, and capacity building providers, with proven results of improving student success and institutional effectiveness. This is a true testament to the commitment and collaborations from our own agency and external partners that have help to support all of these efforts. Next slide, please. The second focus area of IPI is to support system-wide transformation through continuous connections internally as an agency, and also ensuring that we are serving our stakeholders. Since the goals of IPI have evolved again and extended beyond those named in the legislative intent, we will continue to collaborate and coordinate efforts in order to avoid redundancies in our offerings. And lastly, we will continue to improve our standard operating procedures and evaluate our current and new vendor agreements to ensure that the deliverables are in alignment with the intended outcomes we hope to achieve. For example, in response to the COVID-19 pandemic, IEPI pivoted many of our professional development events and resources to support the districts and the system office in responding to the worldwide health crisis. And invaluable support and CEO collaboration was the launch of the weekly Chancellor's Office System webinar series, which drew weekly audiences of nearly 2,000 participants. The Chancellor's Office initially convened the system webinars in response to the challenges by the COVID-19 pandemic. However, we've continued this favorable evidence from follow-up surveys that were led by IEPI and recognized that the series served as a valuable space for sharing information to the field in a timely manner, including tools, resources, and student-centered evidence-based practices as our system navigates the consequences of this pandemic, but is building towards an equitable recovery and making progress towards the vision for success. The 16 system webinars conducted in 2021 reached a combined live audience of more than 15,000 community college professionals, stakeholders, and students. This is a true example of supporting system-wide transformation through our collaborative and coordinated efforts between the Chancellor's Office and our colleges who often share their experiences in these system-wide webinars. Next slide, please. Focus area number 3 is the integration of IEPI to support core strategies. IEPI has moved towards system-level integration that utilizes internal feedback loops and builds an infrastructure leading to participatory governance and targeted strategic planning and implementation. For example, in coordination with the leadership from the Classified Senate, the California School Employee Association, and our evaluation partners at Insights at Sacramento State, we developed a survey to examine classified professionals' understanding of equity as a mindset and a practice, and the degree to which their respective campus environments have sought to effectuate equity-minded institutional change. We also solicited feedback on barriers to access, desired frequency of learning opportunities, in addition to which time works were ideal for virtual professional learning experiences. These results were actually recently shared with CSEA and 4CS, and we are in the beginning stages of planning future professional development opportunities that will complement what is offered at the local level. In addition, earlier this year, the Chancellor's Office, in partnership with Academic Senate for California Community Colleges and Faculty Association for California Community Colleges, FAC, launched the Part-Time Faculty Needs Assessment Survey. Much like the impetus for the classified survey, we hope to develop a more inclusive professional development plan to inform the design and implementation of DIA-related professional learning intended to support our part-time faculty. And then lastly, the technical assistant component of IEPI continues to consistently assist our colleges with their areas of focus and have expanded their expertise to include partnership resource teams that can address DIA needs for our colleges in response to the call to action. We will continue to align our technical assistance with the vision for success and our Chancellor's Office priorities to meet the needs of our colleges. Next slide, please. And the last area, the fourth area of focus, is the ability to measure the impact of all of the activities that we have going on. In the new vision, IEPI is making connections between IEPI activities and the desired impacts. To that end, we've designed an evaluation rubric informed by the vision for success to assess the solicited and unsolicited professional development proposals from the field and to ensure alignment, feasibility, and impact. In addition, through a partnership with Insights, we've co-designed an evaluation framework for our communities of practice to ensure that our PD providers are producing relevant deliverables based on the reported goals in alignment with the CO priorities. This expectation will continue to be reflected in all of our vendor agreements. We're also soliciting periodic reporting on alignment and effectiveness, measuring the extent to which program goals and objectives have been met, documenting areas of progress or achievement, and identifying opportunities for continuous improvement of the curriculum, which is essential to our work. Next slide, please. In essence, IEPI remains committed to its 8th year to furthering the vision priorities with a clear focus on furthering reforms around equity, completion, and guided pathways framework, ultimately making higher education more accessible and equitable for millions of students at a time where I think our state needs it most. Lastly, I leave you with the 4 strategic focus areas that will continue to guide the implementation of our strategic changes to IEPI, and that is the alignment to the Vision for Success goals, the integration within IEPI and across the Chancellor's office, supporting our system-wide transformation, and then measuring impacts of activities. Last slide, please. Again, just as a sincere thank you for your time and your leadership, and I welcome any questions or feedback at this time.
Thank you for that.
Sorry I went so quickly, but.
I appreciate that. Are there any board members who have questions or comments?
I do not see any in LA.
Members here in Sacramento. I would just want to say that from someone who serves on a board of trustees in a multi-college district, we have taken advantage of the IEPI technical assistance and found it very, very valuable. And I suspect that across the system, there are districts and single colleges that need and recognize the value of being able to bring a third party in that is also not punitive, but really wants to help in real positive ways. So, and I really appreciate the new design and the new focus on where IEPI is going. So thank you so much for the presentation. You're more than welcome. Is there any public comment on this particular item?
The public comment period for item 6.4 is now open. We will begin with Sacramento, then Los Angeles, and conclude with virtual comments. In the interest of time, you will have a maximum of 2 minutes. Vice President Costa, are there any comments in Sacramento?
No, there are not.
Member Rawlings, are there any comments in Los Angeles?
I see no public comments in Los Angeles.
I see no virtual comments at this time.
Thank you. Did you hear my sigh of relief? Sorry. So we are down to the last 2 items, and I think they're the most important. One is the board member reports, and I'm going to turn this over to Chancellor Oakley, because we would like to begin with a special recognition of one of our board members.
Yes, it's it's a bittersweet opportunity to recognize one of our outgoing board members, someone who has been a tremendous leader of students, who's been a very articulate and passionate voice on the Board of Governors. I've had the great pleasure of being with her on a number of advocacy visits, and her story was compelling and always drew the attention of the legislator that we were speaking with. So it's great pleasure for me to recognize one of our many outstanding student leaders, but somebody who's definitely put her stamp on the Board of Governors, and that is our student board member, Leah Tarasova. On behalf of all of us, thank you for your service on the Board of Governors. Thank you for your leadership, very much look forward to hearing about all the success that you are going to have in your future endeavors. And I also want to thank your parents, who I heard so much about every time I heard you speak, and how amazing they are. Thank you for coming to this country, for bringing your talents, and for sharing them with us here in the California Community Colleges. And I invite our team to bring you a small token of our appreciation. Heavy, but 2 years of outstanding.
I guess your chancellor will be with flowers.
Yeah, take the mask, Eloy.
All right.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Man, we all got to see her in person for
I
once.
know.
right, how nice.
Before we allow board member Carasova to make comments, are there any other board member comments?
Pam, this is Member Grande, and I would just like to express my immense appreciation for the student perspective that Member Tarasova has been able to so eloquently provide to us during her service. She will be greatly missed.
Thank you for that. I too, as the president of the Board of Governors, want to say thank you. I don't care if you were taking Zoom calls from your bedroom or from a couch. You were always prepared. You did not just yourself proud, but you always brought in not just your story, but the stories of the students across the system. You made certain that that was front and center to everything that you did. And there will be students who have no idea who you are or the contributions that you have made. But we, this board, know who you are and the contributions that you've made. And so we hope that as you travel this pathway, that you will not necessarily come back to us, but share where you are in your journey. Don't ever think that we are not interested in that. We are very interested in that. So if there are no more other comments from the board, I'd like for you to give your comments and then see if there are any public comments.
Sure. I just wanted to say thank you to all of you. It's a bit emotional for me as it's my first in person, but also my last meeting today. And I would be giving you all a huge hug if such thing as pandemic did not exist. I cannot believe how far I just personally came when being on this board and being surrounded by all of you, having such incredible figures in front of me to show what leadership looks like, despite the pandemic challenges, despite the mic problems that we had on Zoom. It really helped me to outline who I want to be. So that has been incredible for me. First starting on this board, I would hardly ever speak in a class, let alone on a huge board like this. I was a lot more quiet and a lot more nervous, especially when I had my first advocacy event when Vice Chancellor O'Brien had to give me a 5-minute pep talk right before the call with a congressman, as it was my first time doing it. But looking back, when now I can hardly recognize that form of Yulia anymore. So I think that has been a large part because of being surrounded by all of you and your encouragement every day. And, just having you all in my presence has uplifted me and empowered me in so many ways that I cannot even fully describe. So thank you to all of you. And Joshua, you're going to do amazing next year. You're going to get an amazing person to do the same things that we have been doing. I do believe that, the student position is just going to continue becoming more and more powerful and uplifting. Number one thing that I really wanted to establish in this position is to make sure that it's something lasting and impactful, to make sure that there is a kind of institutional knowledge carrying on. So I'm really happy to hand it over to you as now it begins your term as second year student member technically. And me and Joshua, of course, are still going to be talking over in the next month, figuring out stuff because I'm still going to be here till June, right? But this is my last official meeting, as you know. So thank you to all of you. And despite being through the computer screen with delay, I can feel the love. Thank you very much. And it was an honor to serve with all of you.
The honor was ours. So I'm going to put this out to board members. If you dare to have a board report.
Not
No,
following
if
that.
If you have a board,
That's
if
a
you have a,
second threat today.
if you have, I know, I'm threatening. If you have a board report, please feel free to do so, especially if you have a burning desire. I do know, and just for the record, that board member Williams is not here. He gave me a written email, but what I will do is ask the Chancellor's office to share it with board members rather than me reading it. You're more than welcome. Okie dokie, just remember me. with that said, we also have public forum. And I would like to begin public forum with our Dolores Davison. This will be her final meeting. And we're gonna allow a little bit more time.
Thank you.
You're more than welcome.
Okay. Next at the ready. Stopwatch at the ready. I've been told I have 5 minutes. I just want to provide a quick update to the Board of Governors about the Academic Senate's work over this last 2 years. I am the pandemic president. I was elected in April of 2020, and I started in June of 2020, immediately after the call to action. The Academic Senate consists of an executive committee of 4 elected officers, 10 elected regional representatives, and our executive director. So we are a small but mighty team of 15. Can I have the next slide, please? We spent 22 focused on 3 major areas: culturally responsive student services, student support and curriculum, equity-driven systems, and transfer in higher education. We have a number of grants and initiatives that you're probably already familiar with, CID being one of them, and the Open Educational Resources Initiative, which I know that Board Member Williams, were he here, would be cheering on because we continue to do that work. Next slide, please. Okay. So I've just listed a few of the things that we've done over the last 2 years in our area of culturally responsive student services, student support, and curriculum. One of them was a special rostrum highlighting Black faculty voices, which was published in July of 2020. A follow-up to the special rostrum about highlighting allies and other voices 2 years after the murder of George Floyd will be released this week. I urge all of you to read it. I will send out my last presidential update with the link to that. We implemented an ethnic studies graduation requirement without having to go through the law. We chaired the DE task force. We were part of the Rising Scholars Program. Thank you to Cheryl Aschenbach, who has been our lead, also working on the Baccalaureate Handbook, a bunch of other things. We've got tons of things, and I'm very conscious of how much time I have. So next slide, please. I am not going to stay more than 5 minutes. Continued work in equity-driven systems, on the DEI implementation work group, on DEI evaluation and tenure review. We've hosted a series of webinars on hiring diversification. We've developed an ASCCC cultural humility tool that will be used at our orientation of our new executive committee next week. Oh my God. We created hiring modules with ACRO. We've co-chaired the EEO Advocacy and Diversity Committee. And we created a framework that I spoke of at my earlier presentation around inclusion, diversity, equity, anti-racism, and accessibility that is embedded in everything that we do from this point forward. Next slide, please. Transfer. Wow, this has been a biggie. We had an academic academy focused on transfer in the fall. We did advocacy around 1111 and AB 928. We have a suggested singular GE pattern that is out for vetting at this point. We were able to, yes, that if I leave no other legacy, I will leave that legacy, that it is out and it is being vetted, and the majority of the comments are positive. There are some negatives, but we expected that. But significant work on transfer. Thank you to Ginny May for the Transfer Alignment Project Work Group and the work that she's been doing. We've been working on the UC transfer pathways, lots and lots of work around this. Next slide, please. Legislative priorities led by Ginny May as our legislative advocacy chair, equitable access to technology, expanded transfer opportunities. We met with over 40 legislators all on Zoom until a couple of weeks ago. We supported a number of bills, and we also meet regularly, not only with the legislature, but with the LAO and the Department of Finance around areas in academic and professional matters. We are very appreciative to FAC and to our union partners for the work on the Council of Faculty Organizations and the work that we've done as COFO over the last couple of years. Last slide, I think. No, statistics. We had 577 attendees at our regional meetings. We had over 1,100 attendees at our institutes and plenaries, and over 2,000 attendees at our webinars. That's 4,000 attendees. We did 45 local college visits. We've got 2 more that are coming up. Larry Galizio and I, my partner with the Collegiality and Action visits, we did 5 of those just this year. And we did our first one in person 2 weeks ago at Compton College, which also meant that I got to check off college 103 out of 115 that I have been to. I'm going to Palo Verde in the fall. I am going to hit all 115 before I retire. So with that, my time is up. My time is up. Congratulations to our president-elect Ginny May, our vice president-elect Cheryl Aschenbach. They will be leading our charge going forward. Thank you for all of your leadership, your partnership, and your friendship.
We don't want you to leave quite yet. We're going to bring you. Yeah, just.
I've also been asked to give you these flowers, but I can't take credit for those.
Well, you could.
This is a resolution honoring you from Assemblymember Evan Lowe, who represents Foothill College. I don't know if there's time to read it all now.
Yes. Read the whereas.
Can I read the resolve?
Yes, and the
President Haynes, resolved by Assemblymember Evan Lowe that Dolores Davison be commended and extended a sincere grazie mille for her distinguished record of leadership at the Academic Senate for California Community Colleges, and extended sincere best wishes for continued success in your future endeavors.
You sneaky, sneaky. You asked me who my legislators were and I told you and I.
Mask off.
Mask off.
Mask off.
Mask off.
Flower boy. It's usually the flower girl.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dolores.
Thank you all so much and good work, great work today and always. And the Academic Senate looks forward to continuing its efforts with you going forward with our new leadership. So thank you all so much.
We also have public comment.
Oh, God.
Yes.
Indy? Come on. Come on. You guys know who I am, hopefully. Wendy Frohline Coop, president of FACT. So you've received, can I take this off?
Yeah.
Dolores has received many deserving accolades for her leadership during her unprecedented time during the pandemic. However, your preparation for the role came through a decade plus of service to our community colleges and our students. We're lucky to have her as a leader with such wealth and knowledge and experience. Statewide service will not be the same without you. It is comforting to know that you will be continuing to help with CID. I will personally miss seeing you at statewide meetings, but I'm happy that you'll have more free time for looking at art, eating delicious meals, and shopping for beautiful purses in Italy. I'll admit I'm a little jealous, but I hope that I can join you for one of your future trips. I love you. Thank you.
Is there other public comment? No?
We can go to LA if there are any public comments waiting there.
I would just say, job well done, Dolores. We appreciate you.
Okay.
And any other public? Yeah.
Yeah, we do have 2 hands raised at the moment. Angelica Campos, you have control of your mic and can address the board.
All right, good afternoon. I'm actually calling in from my campus right now, down in City College of San Francisco. Dolores, I just wanted to say it's so disappointing I wasn't there in person with all of you, I just wanted again to express my love and appreciation of you, Dolores, because over the last 2 months, as I stepped into the role of president, and even before that in my time in SSCCC, you've always been someone I admire, someone I look up to, and someone who has again supported me over the last 2 months, or almost 2 months of this term and the rest of the term. Again, I just wanted to say thank you so much. And I hope to see you soon at the last Academic Senate meeting that you will be chairing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Angelica.
Next, we have Jen Galanato. You have control of your mic and can address the board.
Thank you so much. And I promise this will be the last public comment that you all will hear from me. But hello, everyone. My name is Jen Galanato. I serve as the Vice President of Regional Affairs for the Student Senate for California Community Colleges. I wanted to express my deep and profound love and admiration for both Board Member Tarasova and President Dolores Davidson. I wanted to thank you both for the incredible work that you've done on the behalf of our 116 colleges across the 73 districts and serving 1.8 to 2.1 million students fearlessly. I've had the honor of doing so alongside the both of you in such a short amount of time. I wish I met you earlier as I was a student leader, like my colleague on the line had also said. It's so sad that I didn't get to serve all 12 months with you, but I'm glad that I got to do it in the time that I've been able to. You both have inspired me endlessly, and I cannot believe that it's the end. And I'm so honored to have worked with both of you in your strides toward diversity, equity, inclusion, and as well as ensuring that our students are, each and every one of them, have the best collegiate experience within our time in our system. So I wanted to thank you so incredibly much as a student myself on my behalf. I'm trying not to cry over this too. I wanted to thank you both for also being the leaders that you are. You inspire me continuously as two fierce and incredible women that I hope to be one day. So thank you so much. And thank you for all the time to mentoring me as well, to being the student leader that I am today. I couldn't have done it without you because it's been such a crazy year, and I'm thankful I got to serve it alongside the both of you. President Campos and I have had both a wild year in the time that we've had. So thank you both for all that you've done. And I hope this isn't the end of our journey, and I hope to cross paths with you again. So that concludes my public comment for today. Thank you again to both of you. I adore you the most. And on the behalf of my community as well, Mahal Kita 300.
Any other public comment?
Yes, we have one more. Aaron Laporte, you have control of your mic and can address the board.
Hi, thank you again. This will be my last one as well. Yeah, I really wanted to just, thank, Board Member Tarasova for her leadership. I'm so glad that being part of the Student Trustee Caucus, I got a chance to meet her and work with her in that capacity. And I know, I'm going to give a shout out to also the SSCCC leadership as well, Angelica Campos, and especially Jen Galanato. I don't think I would have been able to make it through the semester without that, that support from them, and especially with Jen's help with getting my student engagement empowerment symposium going at my school. But yeah, and Yulia, thank you so much for all you do for, the students of, California and everything that you've done. And I just really cannot emphasize how much you've transformed my life and with your leadership. So thank you. And I do hope, that, moving forward that we're able to work at some capacity again in the future. I know that being a student trustee was not easy, especially during this time of year. And, us all working together and trying to get that student engagement was really difficult, but we did it. And again, thank you to you, Yulia, Jen. You don't get enough accolades or acknowledgement. And I really want to put that out there because you deserve it. You've worked so hard. And I just think that, I'm sorry, I'm going to put it out there. Jen Galanato, you deserve a huge thanks as well. So just wanted to put that out there. Thank you. Both of you, you're amazing. And I cannot thank you enough for changing my life.
Thank you. With public comment completed, the business of the Board of Governors is now complete, and we can now adjourn. Thank you.
It's my first time getting